this computer. Okay, perfect.
All right.
All right. Hey, perfect. So welcome, Kareem.
Thank you.
So we met on Twitter. We were both tweeting, and I was impressed and struck by, I think, I felt like you were very much dealing with the facts and talking about data, and I do too. So I thought it would be a really good productive discussion to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict in 2023, or in this case, I should say Israel-Gaza conflict, perhaps, and see if we can not just make heads or tails of it and discuss, the two different positions, but also see if there's any solutions. Because I think
Yeah.
all of us want an end to the death and destruction, not just now, but like in the future, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I think that I think it is important, and I agree with you that it is important that any kind of sort of discussions about this not be, entirely driven by emotion. It's important to kind of have the right information. It's important to have the facts, and that's really the only way that we can hope to find like a truly just and lasting solution for this situation. But burying our heads in the sand and pretending that how we feel about it is the only thing that matters is never going to get anyone anywhere, and it's just gonna the cycle is just gonna keep on, repeating itself.
Exactly. That's what I'm struck by is like this thing has been going on for decades, right?
Yeah.
And I have my opinions as to what perpetuates this conflict as well, the
Mhm.
main factors versus like secondary factors. But obviously, like if there is to be a resolution, it has to be based on reality.
Of
And
course.
I think feelings on both sides, on all sides, have been definitely complicating a lot of the solutions.
Yeah, because feelings can be manipulated, right? I mean, even if we set aside the feelings of Palestinians and Israelis themselves, the global sort of opinion or the opinion in the West versus the opinion elsewhere, that can be manipulated, right? So the way people feel about things isn't always, it doesn't always reflect the reality of the situation. And as long as we're looking for solutions based on that, again, it's not going to work, right? Like it's not going to address the real issues.
Exactly. I think feelings are downstream of like what's actually going on a lot of the
Mhm.
time. And my thesis in general is like, okay, there's politics, right? There's
Yeah.
political leaders, and if they're able to get things done that lead to de-escalation or peace frameworks or some kind of, peace agreement, like for example, what Israel got with Jordan or with Israel
Mhm.
or with Egypt, right? Or in
Yeah.
general, then I think that people on the ground after a while are like, okay, this is cool, and now we can focus on economic things like having a job and like not
Right.
focusing on endlessly, trying to relitigate what happened or try to create a reality where you win and other people lose,
Yeah.
So, but that requires leaders to actually accomplish something, moderate
Yeah.
leaders to actually get something done. And I found that over the last, like, I don't know how many years, decades, right?
Yeah.
Um, the leaders have been able to accomplish virtually nothing. When it comes to the Israel-Palestine bilateral agreements.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the big problem because if they had accomplished, then I think the extremists would be marginalized more than they are. And now that they have not accomplished anything, the extremists are like the only game in town. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. I agree that the I think the only way to actually sort of defeat extremism is to solve the root issue, right? Like there's not going to be a military solution for either side, right? Like it's not that we're not going to wipe out Israel, that we're not going to wipe out, Palestine or Gazans or whatever. That's not going to lead to a solution. It's just going to lead to more radicalization from the ones that remain, right? From the ones who were their supporters. In order to have a lasting solution, we have to and eliminate that kind of extremism or make it so that it's so marginalized that their support just shrinks and evaporates. We have to actually find solutions.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through a lot of the stuff. I'm going to share stuff I want to share and then, you as well. And before this, I basically encouraged you, right, to bring as many like the biggest, you know, issues that anti-Zionists have, right?
Yeah.
when I say anti-Zionist, right, I mean people who are upset at Zionists, right? And
Yeah.
Zionists, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, but in general, has meant all kinds of things, ranging from you support the state of Israel's right to even exist, right?
Hmm.
To expanding the state of Israel to take over like some region that is bigger than current Israel, right? People call
Right.
greater. And then
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things that people ascribe to Zionists, which I have seen literally people on Twitter have
Yeah.
said there's all kinds of gripes, but they fall into two categories mostly. They're either this one is not going to sound good, but it's repurposed anti-Jewish tropes like
Of course. Yeah.
Jews control the governments, Jews control the media, and so on. But they don't say Jews anymore. They say Zionists control the
Right.
media. Zionists
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one type, and that I feel is kind of anti-Semitic because it's just replacing the word Jew with the word Zionist. But everyone kind of understands that most Jews, but then I think most Jews are Zionists in a different way. They're the minimal Zionists, saying, okay, I want my country to exist. I want to have a country. Not necessarily because you've seen a lot of Jews go out protesting
Hmm.
the horrific bombing, okay, of Gaza. And I think if people just focused on like, let's stop the horrific bombing, right? They would have a lot of like Jews and everybody on their side being like, yes, that is a good idea, right?
Yes.
Ceasefire. But like but I feel like there is also a second type is like starting to say, well, and also the Zionists have been at this for 75 years. We're relitigating the last 75 years, the Nakba and everything, and Zionists are at fault for everything. And as a Zionist, and like if not for the Zionists, everyone would be living in peace, and the Zionists and the Zionists. So that second part is where people are like, well, I agree we should stop the carnage. And I agree
Hmm.
that we should find a peace solution. But like, whoa, are you saying that we're not really a people, that my people shouldn't exist, that my people shouldn't have a
Hmm.
state, that like we should go back to Europe? Like that's where you lose a lot of
Yeah.
the people, and including
Yeah.
people who support Israel, whether you call them Zionists, whatever, but like they support it and they could be in Germany, United States, whatever, but they're like, whoa, so actually this is about like eliminating the Jewish state. And that's
Hmm.
where I feel like it does a disservice to both sides because and I've seen Muslims say this, and I've seen Persians from Iran, who left Iran say this, which is that like, we just focus on solving the current, like first let's solve the current thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and probably alienating everyone is not the best move from the
Hmm.
Zionist camp. So that's what I think. But I encouraged you to bring, however, all of the biggest
Yeah.
Zionist gripes because I feel that we should address them. I just don't think that necessarily that's the most productive thing in the current situation, but I still
Right.
think we should
Yeah.
address.
Yeah. I saw an interview with Norman Finkelstein, and they were asking, what do you see as the solution to the Israel-Palestine problem? And he said, it's pointless to talk about that right now when we are in the middle of a crisis. Right now, we have to just end the current crisis. There are people dying, there are people suffering. The situation is devolving rapidly, and it could very quickly escalate to regional war. So right now we just have to address the immediate issues before we can start talking about a grand solution to this whole problem, right? I mean, and I think that that's fair, right? Like we kind of have to just get out of the immediate crisis in a way that allows for a peace process to even happen.
Yeah, I agree. And it's complicated by the fact that Israel's current goal, as I see it, okay, and some people are going to dispute this on the Israeli side, okay, but I think that the goal is to eliminate Hamas, right? It's not to bring back the hostages. Like, for example, if Hamas said, "Here's all the hostages back. We have
Mhm.
no more hostages, right? Now, can you stop bombing?" Right? They're going to be like, "No, like we want to eliminate the the terrorist threat, right?"
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
I want to say, first of all, that is an extreme goal, okay,
Yes.
in the sense that it is hardly achievable when even the US couldn't eliminate the Viet Cong in tunnels in Vietnam,
Yeah.
and so on. But I will, and the Taliban, they couldn't eliminate after 20 years of fighting because it's not like the Taliban of 2001 were still there. They were like old men. right? It's
Yeah,
it's more like the ideology
exactly.
keeps being perpetuated by teaching the children. And look, it's one thing to teach children, which I have a huge problem with, like teaching children, shoot the Jews, kill the Jews, right? That's one problem.
Hmm.
But another problem is when the Jews have literally killed your family. Like
Yeah.
at that point, you don't need to teach the children that.
Hmm.
They're just gonna grow up with like this hate in their heart.
Yeah.
So I think that Israel's goal is too expansive, and it's a problem. And when I say Israel's goal, I mean not just Netanyahu, but like a lot of people are fed up with the the aggressiveness of Hamas. Like they thought that once Hamas became the rulers of Gaza and
Hmm.
were put in charge as a political party, right? Never mind that they expelled Fatah and they took over the whole thing. Never mind that they took everyone's guns, right? But the
Hmm.
expectation was okay, they would focus now on the welfare of the Gazan people. Um, and we're going to talk about this, but I think what they've done is they've enabled all these billionaires, okay, three billionaires in Qatar, but then there's also a lot of millionaires. There's like a lot of millionaires on the top and their children, and they're living the good life, right? They're not in Gaza.
Hmm.
Okay. And so they've mismanaged. They haven't really, like 70% of the Gazan economy is Hamas. Okay. Transactions. Like that, you could look it up. It is insane. And like at some point, it is not just, it's like, can Gaza have a better ruler class that will focus on the needs of the people and helping clean up the water aquifer, making sure they have at least clean water and like, lifting the blockade versus like, hey, let's stockpile weapons, dig up water pipes, and
Hmm.
keep shooting. So I can understand why Israel wants to do this. So I've basically said I think Israel's goals are too extreme, but also
Hmm.
I can understand why they're fed up with that because they thought, hey, we we'd like to see the Gaza government become more like take the money and become more moderate, and then hopefully something can happen. So I don't know. I
Okay.
think
Um, I think that that's probably a good place to kind of start if we're because again we've been saying that this issue this conflict has been going on for decades. And I think that's sort of a good place to start examining the timeline for the leading up to the current immediate situation would be around 2005 2006 2005 when Israel withdrew from Gaza, withdrew any settlements from Gaza, and then 2006 of course the Palestinian elections, the last Palestinian elections so far, and then sort of everything that kind of happened since then. I think that's like a good place to begin, right?
let me start sharing my
So
screen, and
yeah,
we
absolutely.
can follow along with the articles that have been published over the years. Okay,
Okay.
can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm sharing the window. So um, I'm going to type find articles that I've seen over the years, and you tell me if something's inaccurate or unfair or whatever.
Okay.
Um, okay, so here's a New York Times article from 2005. In unruly Gaza, clans compete in the power void. So before Hamas took over, it was
Hmm.
essentially like what anarchists like. I speak
Hmm.
to a lot of anarcho-capitalists, right? So what happens is everyone has guns. There are
Hmm.
clans called Hamulas, okay, in Gaza. The Hamula is the unit, the family clan, okay, and this was going back all the way to hundreds of years ago. And 100 years ago, there was the notables, right? There was family clans like the Al Husseinis and others, and so it is still the case today. And in
Hmm.
Gaza, it was very tribal. But what Hamas did was essentially, and this is before Hamas, right?
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
anarchy, there was shootings sometimes, okay, there was gangs, whatever, but when Hamas took over, they took everyone's guns, which yes, please go into, but I'm just saying, like it's a classic case of monopoly on force, right? There was a
Hmm.
maybe a decentralized Gaza. Israel had
Hmm.
withdrawn. There was a political power vacuum, and
Hmm.
libertarians would have been like, okay, cool. There is no monopoly on force. Let's see what happens, right? Like Scottish Highland clans or
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever. But then there was essentially an effort to try to confiscate everyone's guns and bring this group that promised to, hey, we're going to take care of you guys with social programs and so on. So anyway, this is so go ahead. I'm not going to interrupt. I just wanted to say I'm going to share my screen and going to bring up stuff when you talk about the stuff. So
Okay. Okay. So I guess the first thing that we kind of have to establish, or that we can, that a point that the foundation upon which we would continue sort of this conversation on this point is the Israeli withdrawal in 2005 from Gaza um, does not mean that Gaza is not still under occupation. I think under sort of the international consensus nearly is that Gaza is still occupied territory.
hold on, but
Uh,
we're saying in 2005, before there was
yes,
a blockade and before Gaza's airspace and so on was,
yes.
blockade.
I'm saying that it
Yeah,
was occupied before Israel withdrew. We can agree on that point, right?
yeah,
That it was
yeah,
occupied territory prior to the withdrawal in 2005. And
yeah.
I'm saying that the withdrawal in 2005 did not signal the end of the occupation,
Why
right?
not?
Why not? Because um, withdrawing the settlers, or withdrawing, dismantling the settlements in Gaza, yes, that means that um, there's no civilian presence in Gaza, but the borders, the airspace, maritime access, the movement of goods in and out of Gaza, the movement of people in and out of Gaza, the registry of the population, the cell phone registry, all of that is still in Israel's hands. There was no power relinquished. Who would they have relinquished it to in 2005? This was prior to the elections. And
So right,
there was
but
no central authority to relinquish any of this to.
so like
Uh,
that's like saying that Biden, for example, withdrew all American troops from Afghanistan, from Kabul, okay?
okay.
And the claim would be that right now the Taliban is actually occupied by United States forces, even though there's no forces there, because
Okay.
but they run the country. Like what I guess what I'm saying
But
is
but
this,
but if
yeah,
if okay, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
no, because
I don't mean to interrupt.
the Taliban is like Hamas in the sense that they are a group, they're a movement that is in control, and they have the monopoly on force at the moment.
Mhm,
Uh, Afghanistan before, or I should say, after the Soviet War, which by the way killed
mhm,
1 million people, and the
mhm,
CIA was largely involved. Also arming mujahideen, like that's the biggest problem in my mind is arming jihadists, arming militant groups. So we did that, I should say, the United States did that,
mhm,
and helped against the Afghan government, which was propped up by the Soviets. Okay, and 2 million people died. It was a
yep,
terrible civil war. And then when the Soviets withdrew back then. Afghanistan was ruled by gangs, same as this. Okay, it was ruled by warlords. I am not saying that's a good thing because Libya is ruled by warlords after Gaddafi was removed. Afghanistan was ruled by warlords after the Russians
mhm,
left, and the whole thing was in shambles. The
right.
Taliban took over and created some sort of monopoly on force and
Mhm,
agree or disagree with their extreme views on education of girls or whatever, at least they represented some law and order, you could say.
mhm, yeah.
So I view Hamas the same way, but to say that Gaza was occupied after the Israelis left, like Egypt was a neighbor, and Egypt could have provided a lot of um, goods and services too. Like so,
Mhm.
I think that Gaza had plenty of opportunities to create bilateral relations with Israel and with Egypt. That would be my
I'll get to that in a moment, but
yeah.
I will address. Sorry, I will actually, that you brought it up. There was an opportunity. There was a brief opportunity after the 2006 elections, but I'll get to that in a moment. Um, what I mean is that redistributing the Israeli forces outside of the actual territory of Gaza, but on the perimeter, and still exercising full control over um, Gaza. Like, was there an authority in Gaza that was capable of, signing international agreements, or engaging in unrestricted trade? Were they in control of the border crossings out in and out of Gaza? or was that still being controlled by Israel and in Rafah, Egypt? Like, how
2005.
much control? Yeah, how much control did an authority in Gaza have over Gaza as a sovereign territory?
So before 2006, before Hamas was elected, the expectation was that the government of Gaza would consist of Fatah and whoever else ran, okay?
Hmm.
And that they would recognize the existing agreements. Like the whole thing that I
Right.
started with, right, is that the moderates need to actually get something done, some sort
Yeah.
of peace agreement. So Abbas was that guy. Like, unlike Arafat, okay, Abbas looked like a guy who was actually he was sincerely committed to this
Hmm.
project, okay, of
Yeah.
politically trying to go to the UN and get like political recognition, right, and all this
Hmm.
stuff. Um, Hamas, on the other hand, if you read, I'm going to bring this up, like the history of
Yeah.
Hamas and Fatah in Gaza is a history of civil war. It's a history where Hamas says no.
You're
Yes, we
right,
got
but hang
elected.
on.
Yeah.
Let me just address that point real quick. Are you aware of the Gaza bombshell?
Gaza what?
The Gaza bombshell.
No.
Okay, so in the immediate aftermath of the 2006 election, um, which Hamas won. Now, remember, this election was not just for Gaza. The election was for the Palestinian Legislative Council, and that covers the West Bank and Gaza.
Right.
Hamas won the election narrowly, but they did win. So they actually would have had the right to form the government for for the entire Palestinian Authority. That was their right. And instead, what ended up happening is that the United States and Israel backed a Fatah coup against the Hamas government because they didn't like the outcome. And actually, if I believe Hillary Clinton was later quoted as saying that if we were going to allow elections in Palestine, we should have made sure that we controlled who the winner would be.
Well, before, let me just go chronologically because it's
Yeah,
important. Um, and it's also important because you can't use future
absolutely.
events to justify past events,
No,
right?
no, no. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So I just want to say, very important to the viewers here, people don't realize is that the reporting at the time, okay, this was
Yeah.
the Guardian, said that voters rejected Fatah's corrupt image, okay,
Yes.
and endorsed Hamas for its opposition to Israel and for providing welfare, schools, and nurseries to the impoverished residents, okay? This what people always miss is this part because it's become buried in history. But um, Hamas was like Al Capone, okay? Al Capone gave a lot of, helped a lot of people. And
Yeah.
people said, look, Fatah is corrupt. Never mind that Hamas is even more corrupt, maybe potentially, because they have now millionaires and their kids living outside of Gaza, siphoning off all the money that is being sent, international aid money that should be going to Gaza. I'm talking about before 2023.
Mhm.
But never mind that. And it turns out Hamas was also corrupt. But the reason why people endorsed Hamas was not just opposition to Israel. Maybe that's not what they wanted. It's not clear. But this is a confounding factor. Hamas had been
Of course.
providing social programs.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Actually, I think that the Hamas victory might have been more of a rejection of Fatah than an endorsement specifically of Hamas, because at that point, and probably until this day, I would be surprised if that opinion has changed. That Fatah was enormously compromised, very corrupt, and ineffectual, and I think that that's sort of the impetus that drove people to vote for Hamas. They were hoping for a change, sort of. You could call that domestic change, right? If we're talking about domestic policy, sort of the running of the uh, the uh, the Palestinian territories, as opposed to just specifically the way they relate to Israel. And this might actually surprise you, because exit polling done immediately during those elections, exit polling by Near East Consulting, I believe, found that 80% of Palestinian voters were in favor of a peace agreement with Israel. So
80%
so
at that time.
80% at that time, which it means that Hamas had an enormous mandate from the people to seek peace with Israel. That would have been their responsibility.
Yeah, but they rejected that mandate. And we'll get into that. But Uh,
we will. But look, I'm just saying that at the level of the population, you had broad support for a peace agreement with Israel.
can we look up a
So
poll? Is that PCPSR
no,
polls?
it was I think it was Near East Consulting, and you can look for exit polling conducted for the during those elections during
All right,
the
let's see.
2005 or 2006 Palestinian elections.
Good thing for Google and the internet, huh?
Yeah.
Right around this time, Google started to organize the world's information. Okay,
Yeah.
so where can we find attitudes about?
Um, I was cited in I believe that there's a citation in the Wikipedia article, and there should be a link there to the poll. Um,
Legislative
uh,
elections were held in the territories. Okay, this is
yeah,
what we're
yeah.
talking about.
Maybe
Legislative elections, not the
yeah,
presidential.
not the presidential elections, but the legislative elections are I think what matter more. That's sort of what the way how you form the government, right?
Why was
Um,
Fatah run by Farouk Kadumi? Is this like he's not
I
the
think he would have been the prime minister, not the president. I
okay?
think he would have been sort of the candidate for the for prime minister. But if you scroll
Mhm.
uh, down further,
By the way,
it's
these guys seem to try to they're centrist. I just saw
mhm,
this right now. Uh,
yeah,
Alternative to two-party system. I'm always sympathetic to other approaches and seeing what
yeah,
else can be
yeah.
done. So that's interesting.
Oh,
Anyway,
me too. I think the two party system fails everywhere it goes.
yeah.
I think it locks people into a false dichotomy. But if you just scroll
Oh,
down
by
so
the
I
way,
can see.
sorry, one last thing. I thought this
Yep.
was important. I just noticed it. Mustafa Barghouti, okay,
Yep.
who arguably launched the Second Intifada, right? Or he was an influential figure. He apparently headed up a different group, not Fatah, and he headed up Independent Palestine, which I imagine would mean, well, I don't know. Let's see what through sovereign, independent, viable, democratic Palestinian state on all of the territories occupied by. Okay, so he's a territorial maximalist as well, and he wants to
Well,
eliminate it.
in 1967, he's talking about the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem.
West Bank. No, he says all Palestinian territories occupied. Oh,
Occupied.
occupied 1967. Okay, my bad.
1967, yeah.
1967.
I think that's a very crucial distinction, of course, because there will be people. There are obviously some facts who believe that they should take all the land back. But um,
That's what I
and
have a problem with. That's what
for a
many people
very,
have.
very long
Yeah.
time, I was a very strong proponent of the two-state solution, 1967 borders. Um, and I would still like to see that happen. I do think that is the best compromise solution.
Hmm.
90 full sovereignty, 1967 borders, and sort of mutual cooperation. Um, I know that right of return of refugees is a thorny issue, and I can understand why. Certainly, especially in
Oh,
a
we'll get
two-state
to
solution.
that. We'll get definitely to
But
the issue.
I don't. I think that the point has to be addressed, even if it's in the form of financial reparations or something. Even because, but it does have to be that
Sure,
point does have to be addressed.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I am if there was a true if I felt that there was a true will and chance for a two-state solution, I would still be very, very strongly pushing for that. But I don't see not only do I not see that there is the desire for that, especially in the current Israeli administration, um, but I don't think that there was ever a real desire for a true two-state solution. And we can even go as far back as Yitzhak Rabin, who specifically said that he was planning on giving the Palestinians less than a state.
All right, let's
So
we'll definitely dig into that.
the
That's a subject.
two-state solution as an idea, I like it. I want it. I want it to be executed the way that it is being pitched to people.
Right.
But unfortunately, feel like I don't feel like real intent and real work was done to make this possible. And now
Well,
it has
look,
become
I think
more difficult.
this is relevant at this point. Maybe if you want, you could tell people about your background, right? If you want, I'll tell them about my background, which is basically my family came from Russia,
Mhm.
Russian Jews. Jews obviously have an experience of being in ghettos, right? In Russia, they were in something called the Pale of Settlement. In Europe, they
Hmm.
were in ghettos, and they were always told to go back to their state. Okay.
Yeah.
And one day you'll have your own country, just not here, and
Hmm.
like while you're here, you should know your place. And I feel, by the way, and we're gonna get to that when we talk about Palestinian refugees. I feel like Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, Syria, Kuwait, like a lot of places that have not given them true citizenship, like Jordan has, or
Hmm.
like every Western country has.
Hmm.
Uh, it's an explicit policy of the Arab League to treat Palestinian refugees and their children
Hmm.
as the way the Jews were treated in Europe and Russia, which is to say, you have no citizenship, you have no equal rights. In fact, in Lebanon, they passed a law in 2001 saying they couldn't own any property, and
Hmm.
for the longest time, they can't like hold hold jobs like lawyer, doctor, like top positions. That's Lebanon. In Syria, there's a problem which I'm later get into. Yarmouk refugee camp,
Hmm.
like is that, and then because of Hamas allying itself in some way with the Sunnis during the Syrian civil war,
Hmm.
this Palestinians were really attacked by Bashar al-Assad um, during that war, horrifically. Uh,
Hmm.
Not as horrifically as Aleppo, but like pretty badly. In Jordan, much better. They got citizenship, but then the Palestine leaders decided that no, Jordan shouldn't represent you. And Black September happened, which I'll get into. And then in Black September, they were massacred. Some people say up to 25,000 Palestinians were killed in 11 days.
Hmm.
That's an exaggerated number, but that's what Arafat claimed.
Yeah.
Um, and then in Kuwait, they were expelled because of the PLO and Fatah in particular, I think, um, was on the side of Saddam Hussein because Iraq has
Hmm.
historically been a friend of the Palestinians. And to this day,
Right.
Iraq has never recognized Israel as a country.
Hmm.
But like because of that, because of their weird alliance with Saddam, the Kuwaitis not only were they displaced during the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, but also
Go for it.
afterward they were ethnically cleansed, pushed by the Kuwaitis. Half of the
Hmm.
half of all Kuwait basically was ethnically cleansed. And so my point is that their leaders, the leaders of the Palestinians,
Hmm.
um, tend to be this non-state actors like Arafat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And rather than living under a real state like Jordan or
Hmm.
Lebanon or whatever, um, these non-state actors do things like push Lebanon to civil war and like exacerbate problems, which end up uh, boomeranging back on the Palestinian civilians,
Hmm.
just like happens not just in the Palestinian case, but in every group, like the Tamil Tigers. If you look at Tamil genocide, the Tamil Tigers, which you might not know, in Sri Lanka, the
Hmm.
liberation tigers of Tamil Elam, okay? You look around the world, you see the same things. These guys are like, oh, we need to liberate militant organization that was based in Sri Lanka that wanted to
Hmm.
essentially create an independent Tamil state. Sound familiar?
Hmm.
Okay. Continuous discrimination, violent persecution against Sri Lankan Tamils by in this case, Sinhalese dominated Sri Lanka government. Okay. So instead of
Hmm.
Zionists, you have here the Sinhalese. And
Yeah.
my point is that whenever these terrorists or whatever the groups go ahead and try to fight for quote liberation or whatever, the actual it leads to things like uh, exacerbation of the conflict, and
Hmm.
you could see this around the world. I'm saying I'm going to keep coming back to this. Is Israel's not unique?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, like the Palestine conflict, it's just the thing that we know in the West because Israel is like the monotheistic faiths all go back to Jewish religion. Okay. So Christians know about Jews, Muslims know about Jews. Like if you ask someone in China, like some Buddhist, right, about Palestine, they're not gonna like, they don't care. I think
Hmm.
it's mostly because the Abrahamic faiths care about Jews
Hmm.
and because whatever the Jews do, it becomes famous. But like you don't know about, you probably never heard about the Sri Lankan Civil War, right? Or any of these things. Other.
I've heard of it, but yeah, I'm not well versed in it, but I'm aware of it.
Oh, you're okay. Most people, that's good. See, I think because you care about facts. Most people don't understand that these are patterns that repeat throughout the world, and
Of
it's
course,
just
yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
yeah. In any case where a population is feels that they are being controlled by another population, there's always going to be conflict, and in many cases that conflict erupts into violence, and that violence tends to be counterproductive. It's not a new pattern. And you know, we've seen that. I mean, you can even extend that to colonialism, right? You can go
Sure.
back to the colonialism of Africa, the colonialism, the colonialism of India,
Well, I
right?
just want to be I want to separate colonialism from this because um,
Mhm.
these are two populations that were in the same area, right? They have an
Yeah,
indigenous
yeah.
tie to the land.
Yeah, no, no. I don't mean to suggest that the you know Jewish culture or Jewish faith or Jewish people do not belong in the Middle East, or that they do not originate from the Middle East or any of that. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Many people
Um,
do. Many people do deny that. I'm just saying, but
although I will point out that colonial or colonialism or you know variations of that exact word were used by the early Zionist leaders themselves. Theodore Herzl called this a colonial affair. He reached out to Cecil Rhodes and said, you know, I invite you to participate in this colonial matter. I'm reaching out to you because it is a colonial issue. When he communicated with Britain, he said, you know, they will understand it because it is a colonial matter.
mhm.
So the word, I didn't pick the word was being used by from the very earliest days of modern Zionism.
Oh, all I meant to
Um,
say is this, is that when the Vikings arrived in the New World, or the Spanish
mhm,
conquistadors, or the English or the French, right?
mhm,
They didn't have in their mind, we're coming home, right? They didn't
mhm.
have in mind like we have ties to
Yeah.
New York or whatever. They called it
Mhm.
New York because they literally were thinking about York, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever. So like I'm saying that's that yes, Theodore Herzl and to a greater extent Jabotinsky, right, with the
Mhm,
revision Zionism really did think in terms of colonialism, although in his time it meant different things. It meant
mhm,
bringing electricity and civilization or whatever at that time to a region which was desolate or whatever, right? Or underdeveloped. It's not necessarily just hey, let's massacre the natives or whatever. But
No,
what I
no, that's not what I was implying. That it was always intended to be violent displacement, but it was almost always intended to be displacement of a sort. Um,
Not for all.
the
Not for all. Like Noam Chomsky says in some way he's a Zionist because he used to live there and he hoped he's that old. I interviewed him. Um, many of the Zionists who came there, keep in mind, were socialists who just wanted to build a kibbutz.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Especially in the earliest days. Especially it's the very first actual the first Aliyah that happened back in sort of the late 1800s, 1880s, I believe. It was very sort of socialist in nature. We building communes, mostly revolving around agriculture. Yeah, and here's the thing. I have no problem with cultural Zionism. I have no problem with the idea that Jews want to have a center of Jewish religious and cultural experience in the Holy Land. I think that's a great thing. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. My issue is with political Zionism, specifically as it is expressed now,
Mhm.
in the sense that um, there has to be a Jewish state that is it's and I don't have a problem with there being a Jewish state. I'm not saying there can't be a Jewish or that Jews don't deserve a state. That not at all.
By the way, many people
Um,
are saying that, and we want to
I
just
no no and I disagree with them. But what I but my problem is um, there are only two ways to maintain a state like that. Or any other state where you have a population in the middle of another population or with another population, um, that is trying to be both democratic and at the same time um, specific to a certain religion or ethnicity. And that is, you either have to do it through population control, in the sense that you have to maintain a population majority so that you can operate under sort of the framework of democracy, but still maintain that character
Right.
of the state, if you will. Or you have to impose certain conditions on the population that is there. And this is not unique to Israel. This. It was the same in Iraq, where you had a religious Sunni minority ruling over a Shia population. It's been the same in a lot of places.
Most of
It's
the countries, I'm sure many people know, most of the countries are ruled by a minority. The
Yeah,
Alawites rule in
exactly.
Syria, the Hashemites rule in Jordan, right? Look at the
Yeah,
Hashemites.
yeah.
Who are the
So
Hashemites?
it's not a unique issue. That's what I'm saying. It's not something that is unique, and it is unfortunately it has caused problems wherever it happens. That when you have a population that is trying a specific group of any kind, whether it's ethnic or religious or what have you, that is trying to maintain dominance or supremacy over an entire territory that includes another population that might even be the majority population,
Mhm.
then you have to have rules that keep one population down. I don't mean numerically, but I mean in terms of their ability
Well,
to
before, yeah,
exert
I mean,
control.
that's what happens in Syria and so on. I don't think
Yeah.
Israelis want that, which is why, as a country, I think they limit and they want to limit immigration, just like every other
Mhm.
country. The United States is, very
And,
well that
and,
like Elon
and
Musk
that's the
talking about.
issue. That's why there is this. That's why the right of return is a thorny issue. Because if Israel were to say yes, full right of return for all Palestinian refugees, overnight you would have the Jewish population find themselves a minority in a country that was just the other day the Jewish state.
Which for Jews is like the worst fear because that's what they've been
Exactly.
throughout history. And
And
it
and
hasn't
and
ended well
and
for them.
exactly. And unfortunately, so the solution to that, to prevent this from being sort of the inevitable outcome, was the two-state solution, right? Where we would have a Jewish state on the territory of Israel and a Palestinian state on the territory of the Palestinian territories, and the right of return would then not be applicable to the state of Israel. It would, like I said, it would have to be addressed in some other way
Mhm.
in order for Israel to be this democratic Jewish state.
Well, look, before we talk about solutions, which is one state solution, two state solution, let me
Mhm.
ask a few fundamental questions, right? Which I
Yep.
think I know how you're going to respond because you live in the United States and
Mhm.
United States has a lot of Jews. So you're familiar
Mhm.
with what Jews say. But like
Yes.
many people around the world, especially Muslims around the world,
Mhm.
never met a Jew. Like literally, like
Mhm.
if you live in, I don't know, Kuwait or you
Yeah.
live in Yemen, you used to have Jews all the time. Now you don't, right? So
Yeah.
people grew up with like no Jews. And so their mindset is, hey, I'm a Muslim. Okay. Anyone can become a Muslim. All they have to do is like take on Islam, right?
Mhm.
And so Muslims are all shapes and sizes and stripes. We're a religion. There's a billion
Mhm.
and a half of us. So certainly we're not like a people. We're not like an ethnicity. We're just everybody. So Jews
Mhm.
must be a religion too.
Mhm.
Being Jewish is no more than just like praying in a synagogue and like, learning Hebrew. And what my question is, right, is that you see how Alawites are like an ethno-religious group, right?
Mhm.
You go to
Yeah.
ethno-religious group and you scroll down, like guess who you will find, right? You'll find Jews.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
and like my question is, do you believe that like Jews are a people? Like are Jews like
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, I don't think that there's I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea. I don't understand the objection to that idea.
Muslims object to that idea because they say Judaism is a religion, so Jews can't be a people. Somehow,
Well, I mean, I think that it's I disagree with that. I disagree with that premise. I think that if I think that we have to look at it the way that it is. I think we have to look at it the way that the Jewish people see themselves, as an ethnic group.
right.
And
This is what I'm trying to say is that they dispute what Jews think about themselves. And they're
uh,
going to say, I'm just repeating the words of many. Remember, I said many anti-Zionists, they don't just call for the ceasefire. They don't just
yeah.
talk about Israel should not exist, but they go even further. They say that Jews don't deserve a state because they're a religion. I'm not
Mhm.
I'm not, right? You've heard this before, this argument.
Yeah.
So Jews are a religion. And why should a religion have a nationality? No, a country. Never mind
Mhm.
the fact that like many countries in the Middle East, like majority Muslim countries,
Mhm.
have an official religion. Like all of the like how many countries in the world have an official religion? The vast majority are in fact Islamic. Okay?
Mhm.
It's not like Chile has Catholicism as an official religion anymore
Mhm.
or whatever. The only countries, so never mind, maybe I think that's even hypocritical. Like, even if Jews were just a religion, even so, I think that
Mhm.
living in a country where Muslims make all the rules and all the laws, right, uh,
Mhm.
should then tip you off to like, why should other religions not have that? But never mind that fact. I'm saying that the premise is wrong. That because Jews are in fact, um, even Ashkenazi Jews, which they say are,
Mhm.
you know, Noam Chomsky believes in the Khazar theory, which is a theory that
I've
Jews.
heard, I've heard, yeah, yeah, I've heard that one.
Okay, but this has mostly been debunked by geneticists, but
Yeah,
there are
yes.
still lingering like questions, but for the most
Mhm.
part, the mainstream has said no. Um, Now it's not to say maybe there's some Khazar genetic, some, right? But
Yeah,
nowhere to the point where you're going to say the Jews are not. In fact, so these studies show that Jews have been descended from like a few people.
yeah.
And if you want to see a big genetic bottleneck, this shocked me. So that, mitochondrial Eve, nearly
Mhm.
half of Ashkenazi Jews descended from four women,
Yeah.
nearly half. So because of the low rate of intermarriage throughout Jewish history, which is to say they lived in ghettos,
Mhm.
how many people now on the female side there's more variation, but on the male side, okay, there's very little, and you can trace the Y chromosome all the way down. Like they share that with the haplogroups with the Levant region. Okay,
Yeah.
that to me says they are people in the sense that they haven't they've kept their genetic cohesiveness, and
Yeah.
therefore I think that they should have a state the same way that like Armenians have a state, and Koreans
Yeah.
have.
Again, I'm not arguing against that. I never said that they shouldn't have a state at all. And I'm not, I've never been opposed to the idea of a Jewish state. My only issue with the state of Israel is, I mean, I have some historical objections to the way the state was founded, but I'm not opposed to the existence of a Jewish state. I have some issues with the way the state is being administered, but I do not have an issue with the existence of a Jewish state. That's not that I think it's very important to be clear on that point. That I'm not here saying that um, Israel should be destroyed, that Israelis should be. I'm not even that Israelis should be forced back to wherever Europe or dispersed in the Middle East, anything, and no craziness like that. I'm just saying that Israel has to exist in a way that does not depend on the suppression or oppression of another people. And I would like to see Israel exist in a way that I feel it's strange to me, but I feel like we should be natural allies. Like Israel is in the Middle East. You should be friends with your neighbors. We should be working together. I feel like there's more to be gained working together than working against each other. Um, but I think there's just too much acrimony over how it began and how it has been maintained. Um, but that's not something that can't be solved. I
I
just feel
want
like
to
there has
I
to be
want
a
to get
real
to that.
drive.
Exactly. I
Yeah,
want to get to the because we agree on a lot, right? We're sort of
yeah,
like moderates, okay?
yeah.
And my whole thing is like I wanted to also interview maybe people or other people on Twitter who are more extreme, right?
Hmm.
Like Sheikh Suleiman has Twitter Spaces. I went on those Twitter Spaces. It's very hard to
Hmm.
get a word in edgewise in in that format. Um,
Yeah.
but I spent like an hour there. I was trying to answer questions, and like they're coming from a point of view of like you're a Zionist, right? I'm
Hmm.
like, am I like? It's such a broad label, but
Yeah.
because you're a Zionist, therefore you're the enemy straight away, right? So anything you
Sure.
say is going to be picked apart and you're muted and so on.
Hmm.
But I do want to bring on people like Sheikh Suleiman. I don't know what his, I got to see what his name is, his full name.
Just to reinforce my point, are
Yeah.
you I'm sure you're aware sort of I kind of look at the history of the region and sort of in periods of time, right? Like sort of everything prior to the you could say the establishment or the rise of Islam. That's sort of I call that ancient history, and I know it's not like a it's not an academic term, but it sort of covers everything from the sort of um, the appearance or the coming of the Israelites to the Holy Land, and the establishment of the Kingdom of Israel, all the way up to the Byzantine control over the region and the end of the Byzantine control in the early 7th century,
Okay.
when Muslims took control of the region from the Byzantines. And are you aware that one of the first things that was done when Muslims took control of that area was they invited the Jews to come live there?
You're talking about the original, like the earliest Muslims who,
Yes.
were nice to the Crusaders even. Like, yeah.
No, no, we
Not the
The
Crusaders.
Crusaders are
I'm
another
sorry.
story.
I misspoke. Not the Crusaders, the Roman uh Christian leader, okay, who
Yeah.
was massacring the Jews, and then you had Suleiman, I think that was his name, right? He
This
came.
is well before Suleiman. This is before that. Suleiman, I think, I
Oh,
believe, was the
I'm
Ottoman.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm talking about hold on. Um Muhammad's big supporter, the one with the army, Umar. Umar. There we
Yes,
go. Talking
yes.
about,
The second caliph after the death of Prophet Muhammad was Omar,
and
and
he's
that
the
I
guy who
believe
was
in
very
six.
nice. I agree. He was a nice guy, compared to many other Muslim conquerors. But then
Yeah,
again, there's many nice guys throughout history,
of
followed by
course.
absolute psychopaths, and
I
murderers.
just mean that there is no natural enmity between Muslims and Jews, and there shouldn't be any natural, any sort of. This isn't like an
Oh, I
ancient
agree.
religious conflict that has to exist. Um, and I think that there is a lot of room for cooperation and a lot of room for friendship and a lot of room for one of my best friends, my perhaps even my best friend, is Jewish. Um, and we spend tons of time together, and I have that's very there's no problem with that. I have no
No,
problem with
of
that,
course,
and
it
there
should be
shouldn't be a problem
obvious,
with that.
but keep in mind, you guys are both living in a third country, which is run by neither Muslims nor Jews.
Of
Even
course,
though, yeah,
and that's part of the issue is this enmity is being fostered by the regimes and the media narrative that is being pushed on the population, right? Like
yeah, 100%.
the way people look at the issue is framed by the information that they are given, right? Because very few people go out and look themselves for facts or go and read about history,
And neither
right?
the
Like,
Israelis nor the Gazans, obviously not the
of course, no,
Gazans.
I'm talking about both sides. I'm not talking
Yeah.
specifically about. I'm not talking just about Israel. I'm talking about that there is very little appreciation for history. There's very little appreciation for facts, unfortunately, and we are just in the U.S. It's obvious, in Israel it's obvious, and throughout the Middle East it's obvious that there is a specific framing being applied to this issue, that there is a specific agenda being pushed.
Well, I've seen
Uh,
it. I mean, I've gone into this with the Russia-Ukraine war, okay? And yeah, I mean, the media on both sides radicalizes people for years, okay? Whether
mhm,
it's in Ukraine, in Russia, in the United States, and so on.
mhm,
And what happens is, although you're saying there should be no enmity between Muslims and Jews, right? And I agree, but also I feel like when it comes to a country, like
mhm.
give me an example. Russia was called not democratic. Okay, it was called
Okay.
it tried to be part of the West, and
Mhm,
Putin's Russia. Putin was the boogeyman here, and the idea was that it's too different than most Western democracies to be part of NATO, to be part of the EU, to be part of any project that involved Western democracy. Okay, and so when Russia invaded Ukraine, it was a like very all too easy for
mhm,
Western countries, especially NATO members, right, to get together
mhm,
and 24/7 put out in their mainstream media Russia bad, Putin bad, everyone bad. They're and like organize immediately to condemn Russia
Mhm.
in the UN, everything else. So here's my point. Israel is very different from most of the surrounding countries.
Mhm.
From the Arab League, okay, the Arab League. Obviously, Israel won't be inducted into the Arab League anytime soon,
No,
even though
I
it has
mean,
20% Arabs, right? Because
mhm.
it is run by Jews, for the most part. And I don't mean run by Jews in a non-democratic sense. I just mean they're the majority, right? So
Mhm.
it's a majority Jewish country. It is not going to be inducted into any league of these countries, and it's not going to be necessarily a friend of, say, Pakistan, okay, which has like the first um, it has a Muslim majority population, and it had its own problems, with Ahmadis and others telling them that they're not Muslim enough and oppressing
Mhm.
their minorities, whatever. But when it comes to Israel, they're like, Israel bad, Netanyahu bad. And what I'm trying to say is the same way that Russia is too different than the
Mhm.
Western, Israel is too different than the Islamic world and the Arab world. And so it is all too easy for um, the Islamic world. Now it's harder for some Arab countries because these Arab countries had become friends with Israel unofficially
Mhm.
and had their own problems with ISIS and had their own problems with Shia extremists like the Houthi, right? The
Mhm.
Ansar Allah people. Um,
Yeah.
and so they now turn around and okay, we're not going to condemn what Israel's doing because we were doing it and we have our own problems. Whatever. Let's just say some hypocritically do condemn it, like
Uh-huh.
Erdogan, because he's like, oh, the PKK, yeah, we're gonna shoot those guys, but they're terrorists, but Hamas is not.
Mhm.
Whatever. My point is this: that I think if some country is very, very different than this block of countries, then it's
Mhm.
very easy for them to unite over their common principle, which is they're Islamic, right? And Israel's not.
I don't disagree with that in principle. That the things we have in common bring us together, and the things that we have, that are different make it easy to keep us separate. Like as a general rule, I don't disagree, but don't you think that like there were already several Arab countries normalizing relations with Israel? Um, don't you think that that would have been a lot easier if there wasn't not because Israel is Jewish? Don't you think that it would have been easier if historically there hadn't been conflict over the status of the Palestinians or the status of the land and the way it was established and the way it was controlled?
Of course, it would be easier. I mean, I think of
I
these
don't
countries.
think that I'm not saying that Israel would have been, a member of the Arab League, although I don't even between you and me, I don't even think that the Arab League is toothless. So I don't think they have really any real
Yeah.
importance. But what I mean is I think that relations could have been significantly, but I think it would have happened a lot earlier. Even that normalization could have happened decades ago if this wasn't an outstanding issue.
I mean,
Uh,
uh, look, I think Israel is being held to a different standard than most other countries. Like China is oppressing its Uyghurs, but on the other hand, many countries are friends with China. Russia has bombed Grozny, which is the capital of the Chechnyan Muslim Republic, to
mhm,
smithereens. Like it has done arguably worse than Israel has done in Gaza or equal. Okay,
mhm,
and Russia is now friends with Iran, and obviously Iran is not related to Chechnya. But my point is they're Muslims and they're
mhm,
Muslim, and I don't think necessarily if a large country like China, Russia, or the United States goes and massacres
mhm,
a bunch of Muslims, um, still gonna work with them. Look at Saudi; they work with U.S. Like
mhm.
all Kuwaitis, they work with U.S. Like why is that?
Right.
You know, Qatar works with you.
Well, because I don't know if country if there's a difference between the population and the government, right? Like governments tend to not focus on principles so much as they focus on sort of political gain, economic advantage, what have you. But the will of the population doesn't always reflect that exactly. Um,
So do you think the
but
population really cares about Uyghur genocide
I'm sorry.
do you think, for example, the population of Islamic countries really care about the Uyghurs?
I don't think it's as pop. I don't think it's as the issue is as popularized. Like I don't think that the issue is we are there's one of the reasons that in my opinion, I don't have specific data to back that up. I haven't researched it, but one of the conclusions that I've sort of drawn myself is that this is such a high profile issue because because first of all it has lasted for so long. Second of all, because it involves you kind of have to take it back to the United States a little bit. Like ignore Israel for a moment. The United States is sort of the global superpower. They if we're not talking economically or militarily, which we should be, but the United States has won the sort of the media war globally. Everybody knows what's happening in the United States. Everybody pays attention to U.S. politics. Everybody knows when the U.S. gets involved here or there or here or there, or what the U.S. supports or doesn't support. U.S. news is global. And because the U.S. is such a staunch supporter of Israel, and they have this unique relationship that has lasted, since at least I would say 1967. Prior to that, probably Israel's strongest foreign supporter was the UK. But at a certain point, it became the United States, and because of the United
By
States,
the
like
way,
the
the
United
UK was
States,
a world superpower, and the UK had a lot an empire as well. So
of course, yeah, yeah,
it's a similar criticism of the UK prior to
yeah,
19.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly, yeah, yeah. So I think because it involves such high profile people, states, and it has lasted so long, it's constantly in the media, in the global media, right? Especially now. Um, like China doesn't have that same kind of social or media influence in the world. Not a lot of people pay attention to what's happening domestically in China unless it impacts them. You know,
Okay, fine. Let's put China to the side. Let me give you three other examples, and it just explain to me why. So, for example, the Rohingya people. I'm in
yeah,
touch with some of their representatives because I build
yeah,
people systems for stateless people. I'm trying to
yeah,
help
yeah. In Myanmar, yes.
Myanmar. How do you explain that? How many? So let's see, the Rohingya genocide, which again, the article now, I wouldn't be surprised if an article comes out, Gaza genocide in a few years,
Uh-huh.
okay? But we're talking about a civil war. Again,
Yeah,
genocide is disputed similarly how, like, if you ask Cenk Uygur, who's a Turk, or you ask any of the Turks what happened with the Armenians, they're going to say it wasn't really genocide, it was a civil war, and like they were attacking too, and so on. But at the end of
yeah,
the day, okay, one of the groups got severely attacked and persecuted and so on. So
yeah, yeah.
when you look at this, there's a lot of people here, and this happened recently. So again,
And I completely agree, and it's tragic, and it should have received more attention. And there are genocides happening in Africa that should be receiving far more attention than they are. Um, but again, if you poll, 50 people in the street and ask them to point where Myanmar is on the map, I don't think they'll even know what Myanmar is. They'll ask you, is
that's
that a
the
city or
issue.
a state or?
Myanmar is bigger and more populated than Israel. So how is it possible?
Yeah,
That's my question.
again, like it's because Israel is considered to be or is de facto sort of part of the West, sort of the global West, the civilized world, if you will. And that is paid far more attention what they do, whether it's Europe or the United States or Israel, than other parts of the world that people are literally unaware of. Most of them. I mean, people like you and I, we educate ourselves. We keep on top of current, affairs and history, but most people don't, and that's just a sad truth. I
This
wish
to
more
me
people
is the
did.
biggest problem is like,
I do. I agree. I wish more people, would inform themselves because there is a lot happening out there, and um, some things definitely get paid more attention to than others, and that's not to say that some things are more important or less important than others.
this is
But
this is what I'm trying to say. I
yeah,
think that a lot of the outrage about this conflict, and let's make no mistake, it is a
mhm,
horrific bombing of
mhm,
Gaza, right? I
yeah,
fully, you got to own that. But my
yeah,
point is, where were these people see, if they protested every horrific bombing, like Assad
Yeah.
bombing Aleppo and Russia bombing Grozny, and they,
Mhm.
I mean, look at the Myanmar thing. It's like 36,000 people were thrown into fires. This is not collateral
Yeah,
damage.
yeah,
Not
yeah, yeah.
collateral damage. This is
It's
evil.
horrific.
Right. This is horrific. So
And
how is it? So I guess if they were condemning everything, right,
hmm,
across the board, and Israel happened to be one of the condemnations, I'll be like, yeah, like it is number 5 out of like 45, and it's the 5th worst one or whatever it is,
yeah,
whatever. I think a lot of people would be on board with that. The problem I have, right, and I think you pretty much nailed it, right, is that when people say things like this, like Kyle, Kyle Kalinske, for
yeah,
example,
yeah. I'm aware of.
I like him. I like Crystal Ball a lot, right? And but they're not aware of at all of what's going on in the world. They have no idea. And let me just play this real quick. I want to play a couple things.
I mean, what is there to say? I'm running out of adjectives. I'm running out of ways to talk about this. And, it's very defeating watching all this. Look, credit to everybody who's protesting on this. Credit to everybody who's really fighting to try.
He said is the worst thing since the Nazis.
Mhm.
That this he's never seen anything as bad
So
as.
in other words, the 2 million people in Gaza just go to the desert.
By the way, I'm totally against obviously any ethnic cleansing. My problem
Yes.
isn't.
Yeah.
My problem is simply I'm trying to find where he's saying this. He's saying it is the worst thing since the Nazis. Okay.
Right.
Condemnable. But then you'll also have in the next sentence, it'll be some attempt to cover it up and act like they're not doing that. And what? I'm just saying, go to this one area. It's designated for you to be safe. Go over there. See, we're so humanitarian. We drop PAM.
Okay. Here and so I just want to. This is like so maddening to me because when Assad bombed Aleppo, okay, which is the
Mhm.
closest I can think of to this
Yeah.
conflict, he was trying to fight hordes of jihadis, okay,
Hmm.
and he was also a minority who was ruling a country, whatever. But um, he is essentially his. There's a government in Syria, the official,
Hmm.
right? And when the official government is trying to defend even the integrity of Syria, just the existence of Syria,
Hmm.
and these privately funded jihadis, it was called the Al Nusra Front.
Hmm.
So the Al
Yeah.
Nusra Front consisted of many different groups, including ISIS, but also including things like the Free Syrian Army, which is they
Hmm.
called the moderate rebels.
Yeah.
That was short-lived, and then there was also the Al Qaeda in Iraq and Syria, and there's many other groups. So my point is, it was horrific. The Aleppo bombings were killed more people than Israel has killed in Gaza. People
Hmm.
clearly should remember this because it happened in 2016, like
Yeah.
2014,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yet, and here's my point: Assad did not throw leaflets down saying, okay, please evacuate. Right? You have several
Hmm.
days. Please go south. Please evacuate. We're going to bomb all
Yeah.
these buildings. What he did was called a double tap, which is um
Yeah. I'm aware. Yeah. You hit, and then when the people come to do rescue efforts, you hit them again.
you hit him again. If Israel was shown to be doing double taps, and then Israel was also shown to surprise people by just simply bombing them out of the blue, saying, without warning them for hours and days or so on. Look, please understand, warning people and bombing them is still bad. They should never be warning hospitals because what are you
Hmm.
going to bomb a hospital? That's a war crime. Okay.
Yeah.
But besides hospitals, besides these things, it's better than what Assad did, and it's better than what Russia did in Grozny, right? And
Hmm.
so I guess what I'm saying is like, there's no way that this is the worst possible, like
Okay,
thing.
saying that it's the worst thing since the Nazis, and people are love to invoke sort of the Nazis because it's very hyperbolic, and there's a lot of sort of emotion attached to that, because it is something that is very, again, it's one of those things that everybody knows, right? Not a lot of people. I see you pulled up the Chechen War. Not a lot of people know about the Chechen War. Not a lot of people know the specifics about, the Syrian civil war or the war in Yemen, or anything like that. But everybody knows about the Nazis.
Right, because
Um,
the UN called this the most destroyed city on Earth at the time.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And like the most destroyed city on Earth but apparently this is what Israel's doing is unprecedented and so on. Yeah, because people have no idea of how horrific countries have been.
That's true. That's true. That's true. But I think another factor is not the scale as much as the rate. Because a lot of these cities that were destroyed, they were destroyed in a year of fighting, 2 years of fighting, right? There were bombing that lasted for months and months and months. And the carnage was immense. More people being killed than were killed in Gaza, maybe even more buildings being destroyed. I can't 100% say. I know that some studies came out about the percentage of buildings that were destroyed in Gaza, and it's among the worst in terms of the number of buildings being destroyed, more than Dresden in World War II. But it's not the scale, I think, that shocks some people as much as it is the rate.
Well,
And as much
just really
as it
quickly,
is,
the rate in
yeah,
this chapter of war, just the one I have in front of me,
yeah.
it was a month. It would last over 8 months. So this war has lasted
Wow.
longer. And in 1 month, 100% of the city was scarred by war. The
Yeah,
United States claimed every building in Grozny was damaged or destroyed.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And literally, I would say the rate was greater. But I mean, if this drags, look, not all of Gaza is destroyed. Obviously, the city of Gaza is heavily, heavily damaged,
Yeah,
similar to Mariupol, which is just recently people cared about Mariupol. Okay, I
yeah.
admit that they cared about Mariupol, but they
Mhm.
had no idea about Grozny. They had no idea about Aleppo. I mean, who is that? The guy who ran for president? What is Aleppo? He was I forgot. Gary Johnson. I love this. This I love
Gary
it.
Johnson, former governor
I got to play this. This is for
of
people.
Mexico,
Yeah.
was on TV this morning, and he was asked about Aleppo.
This is during the war. During the war.
Yeah, yeah.
And this guy's running for president. Okay, here we go.
It's just disappointing, you know.
What would you do if you were elected about Aleppo? About Aleppo. And what is Aleppo? You're kidding. No,
Oh,
Aleppo is in Syria. It's the epicenter of the refugee crisis.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Okay.
Well, with regard to Syria, I do think that it's a mess.
How do you see this for Gary Johnson?
I mean,
It's just
it's cringeworthy to look at. Like, I mean, and this is a guy who's running for president. This is somebody who's supposed to be informed, right? Imagine how uninformed the ordinary, layperson is in the street, right? You ask them what's going on, and yeah, I mean, there's certainly a failure of education, a failure of knowledge when it comes to global affairs.
but that's an
But
understatement. Here's what I'm trying to say. When the people whose job it is to know things
yeah,
what is his reaction? Oh yeah, well, Syria, yeah, it's
right. He has to
right?
give kind of a generic answer because he has no idea what he's talking about in
He
the
has
first
no idea what
place.
he's talking about. But like, forget Aleppo. Syria is a mess. Is an understatement. Syria is hell on earth for many people
Yes.
living in those cities. However, contrast that with no one knowing about Aleppo, okay, or like not
Right.
know most people, most normies have no idea, right? Or Grozny. But when Israel does the same in Gaza and
Yeah.
warns people to leave, okay, which I'm not saying that's like absolves them, right? But
Yeah.
I'm saying it's better than not warning people and
Yeah.
simply doing double taps and killing the first responders.
Th-
How do
there-
you
there-
explain this? Everyone comes out.
I'll explain it. And it's not. I'm not saying that this is fair, but again, because you have to look at how much attention. Like, where do these people get most of their information? Right? They get it from either mainstream media or social media, right? Mainstream media is reporting a lot more about what happens in Israel than they report on what happens in Syria. In the West, certainly they do. And social media right now, this is one of the first conflicts of this nature that is essentially being live streamed. But people, because of just how much access people have now to internet and phones with cameras, the images are coming out on social media at a constant flow.
No, this is hold
And
on.
then
This was 2014. which we
Yeah.
had social media. But here, I just want to say, you see how it's on ground level? All of the pictures are trying to show as many protesters for
Yeah,
Aleppo.
yeah,
And like, it's as opposed to those pictures, right? This is ground level.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
If they could have shown a picture like I don't know, like this, right? They would have.
yeah,
But they can't because there's no way that this
yeah,
was happening, right? So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah, it's well, like I said, yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot more. The flow of information that normies are exposed to has a lot more of this. Has a lot more content relating to the current situation than it ever did about other conflicts in the Middle East, because Israel is part it falls under the umbrella of the West. So mainstream media reports on it because Israel is a U.S. ally. There's this very strong relationship there, and I actually saw someone make the argument that it, you know, these mainstream media, they're businesses, right? They have to make money, so they're going to put on news that people are that their viewers are going to care about, so that they come and watch. Most people in the U.S. don't care about what happens in Syria or Yemen or Myanmar or whatever, but a lot more care about what happens in Israel. They because they're more aware of Israel, but also because there is that kind of cultural connection between Western populations and Israel. There are a lot more Jewish people who care about this living in the United States. I think the United States has the largest population of Jewish people in the world, more than Israel even.
that's right.
And so there's much more. You're going to get a lot more viewership, and it's very cynical to say this, but you're going to get a lot more viewership if you talk about Israel than if you talk about Syria. And when you're a business, when you're a for-profit news organization, that's what you care about, and it's a sad reality. And I wish that more people took it upon themselves to go and inform themselves. But that's just not how it is. And it is it's weird to say that it's not fair to come to all this genocide, or this war is getting more attention than this war, and it's not fair for these people. But it's weird a little bit to say it that way, because it's awful across the board and should be awful no matter what. But unfortunately, more attention is I don't disagree with you. More attention is being paid to this issue than is being paid elsewhere, and we can talk about all the reasons why that may be. But at the end of the day, that's the reality that we have to contend with,
I
right?
want I want to put a fine point on this in two ways also.
Yeah.
One is I've seen this, unfortunately, I've noticed this back in 2015,
Yeah.
when the Paris attacks, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
seen all of the colors in all around the world
Yeah.
were reacting to the Paris attacks.
Yeah.
Everyone,
Yeah.
Sydney, Opera House, right? Everyone.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
see even a single city with the colors of Lebanon, Beirut. So it turns out that on the same day, same number of people, about 150, unfortunately, by the same group, ISIS,
Yeah.
blew up a double suicide attack at Beirut,
Yeah.
which was at a soccer stadium. Okay. Now,
Okay.
obviously, New York Times, others ran some articles about this. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
But people had no idea. Nobody cared,
Yeah.
man. Nobody
Yeah.
cared. Okay.
Yeah. It's
So,
it's it's unfortunate, but yeah,
so if all lives
you're
matter,
absolutely right.
they say,
Yeah.
right? Oh, you got to care about, and they say, oh, you don't care about brown people. They don't care about brown people. Like,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all, yeah. And so, and the other thing I want to say, and this is going to sound crazy, and you probably heard it from me already, but most people have no idea until you see this. Okay.
Mhm.
I ask people, what is the RSF? Can I
Mhm.
ask you, what is the RSF? Do you know RSF?
Yeah. 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 Me? Are you asking me or?
Asking you. Yeah. Well, now
Oh, yeah. It's I mean, literally, it's Reporters Without Borders, like Médecins Sans Frontières. But it's the journalistic equivalent as far as no.
Oh, wait.
It's
Okay.
just the,
Medicine. You're talking about Medicines Sans Frontier, the Doctors Without Borders, MSF.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm asking about RSF.
Is that not the one for journalists, or am I thinking of something else?
Okay, this illustrates it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
The RSF stands for Rapid Support Forces. And look, until a few months ago, I didn't know what this was. Okay.
Huh.
Rapid Support
Okay.
Forces
Yeah. Yeah.
are paramilitary forces formerly operated by the government of Sudan, but now have become primarily composed of militias. Okay. Its actions against in Darfur, which is a province of Sudan,
Yes. 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 Yes.
crimes against humanity, according to, okay, here is what it has been going on all of 2023,
Hmm.
then, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
There's a yeah.
so, um, these clashes, if you ask what the UN thinks about it, okay,
Hmm.
they're going to say, oops, I'm sorry.
That's it.
Okay, so this has been going on since before October 7th. To its credit, Al Jazeera has been reporting on it. Okay, Al Jazeera, which is
Yeah.
the Qatari, and it's in Doha,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and Al Jazeera, the UN says it's verging on pure evil, because guess what? Violence in Sudan was. Okay, the UN literally comes out, says, in November, amid the Gaza war, violence in Sudan verging on pure evil.
Yep.
More than half of Sudan's population needs humanitarian aid after nearly 7 months of war,
Yep.
okay, in which children were massacred.
Yeah.
Literally, this is not as bad as the Rohingya genocide,
Yeah.
but like the 25 million people need humanitarian help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
70% of it, and again, it's happening not 2016. Social media exists. It's happening right now,
Right.
and have just entered they have just entered the capital like last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and they are literally massacring people now, and
Yeah.
you won't have this. You won't even have 0.1% of this. People have no idea that it fucking even is taking place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me, that is really here. Let me look at the news right now. It's really sad. RSF
No,
entered.
I know what you mean. There's a massive humanitarian crisis right now in Sudan. And yeah, it is not receiving a fraction of the attention.
Thousands
Um,
as the RSF closes in on Wad Madani. Now, again,
mhm.
people have no idea. I have no idea what Wad Madani is, but I think people
Yeah.
should care about the Congo and what's happening there because of the Rwanda genocide spilling over there. I think
Yeah.
this guy Nelson on Twitter is talking about Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the most populous countries in the world. There's some things happening in Nigeria, of course, but guess what? There's Boko Haram. There's
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
Islamist uh, extremists, right? But how is it? How is it? This is what I'm saying. There's got to be a double standard here. There's no way that, people don't even know. I'm not talking about they don't show up to protest. They don't even know.
A double standard. Well, I mean, you could call it that. A double standard to me implies that it's deliberate. That I'm aware of
Oh,
this, and
okay.
I'm
It's
aware
not
of it,
deliberate. It's not deliberate.
but
No.
but I care about this more than I care about this. Whereas in this case, it's more like there's just a lack of attention. There's a lack of equal attention being paid to these things, and a lack of I want to say lack of promotion, almost kind of on the part of the yeah. I mean, it's hard to say really, because I mean, you are there not social media images coming out from Sudan and Ethiopia and right, like is there not this same level of information available?
Have
Or
you
is it
seen
or is
any?
it
They're
that the
not getting
information
the
is
airtime.
available
They're
but it's
not.
not being paid for?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I've asked Kim Iverson, who, I'm friends with on Twitter. I've asked, I've literally, if you look at my Twitter, I tweet to people, hey, why don't you at least look at, right,
Yeah.
this coverage? All they care about, and I follow a lot of people, like they care about Zionism will kill us all. Like, okay, what
Yeah.
about Islamism? What about the fact that Boko Haram was started by a follower of Al Qaeda? What about the fact that the RSF is a proxy war between Saudis and UAE? Like
Yeah.
this is the analysis that I care about. RSF proxy war, right?
Mhm.
And what happens was they're all proxy wars. All of these things
Yeah.
are proxy wars, and essentially they're funding militant groups on one or the other side. And that should be the analysis that should have at least 20% of the people should like be analyzing it like, wait, where is Hamas funding coming from? Where is, you know, and PIJ? Like, it's important because Hamas has failed its people, in my opinion. And I think we should go back to the Gaza crisis. But all I'm trying to say, like,
Well, I'm enjoying this conversation. We're kind of covering a lot of topics, but I feel like it's stimulating.
thank you. Well, I'm just trying to be an equal opportunity, like all lives matter type of guy, right?
Definitely. No, and I think it's important to have that level of awareness for sure. But I think it is important that people pay attention to these things because they do matter. And just because it's not in your face doesn't mean that it's not affecting people there. It's not affecting people elsewhere. And there are usually, like you're saying, yeah, it's proxy wars. There are interests. There are interests in it happening, and there are interests also in keeping it out of the public eye.
Huge interest to keep it out of public eye. If you look
Yeah.
at the proxy war, you're going to find that the proxy war in Sudan, okay, it probably could be avoided just like any other proxy war, okay?
Yeah.
And so look at what's happening. The Gulf heavyweights view the conflict as an opportunity to do what? Cement their hegemonic status in the Middle East, not even in Africa, not even in Sudan. Just you're talking about colonial powers.
Yeah.
It's happening right freaking now. But because again, I think my analysis
We
is,
never really escaped. We never really escaped the legacy of colonialism. You know, like as a planet. It's ongoing. It's just happening in different and it's sort of in a different form now, right?
yeah,
Or
but
not
when the Arab
colonialism,
states were
sorry,
doing it, when the Arab,
imperialism.
when the
I
Gulf
misspoke
states,
there.
sorry to interrupt. I just want to say when the Arab states, the Gulf states are doing it, right?
Yeah.
There's this idea is like, well, that's the Western colonialism is real colonialism. What we're doing,
Yeah.
I mean, we're just the victims here, and you know,
Yeah.
obviously,
Although as I was, I think the correct word in this case is imperialism from both of us. It's not
yeah,
not
imperial.
colonialism, but
You're
yeah,
right.
yes,
You're right.
yes, yeah. We I misspoke, but yeah, no, definitely. There's and in that case, yeah, there is. I mean, I see. I understand what you mean by a double standard. I wish I would like to find a better word because again, to me, double standard sort of implies that there is sort of a deliberate or intent on the part of the people expressing the interest or lack thereof. But there is definitely a double standard when it comes to the people pushing the messaging or pushing the agenda. And sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
No, you're right. Like the individual person has just no idea it's happening. But I would
Yeah.
argue that even when I make them aware that it's happening, right? Like let's say
Yeah.
I go on Twitter and I talk about this, you know, which I do, and I talk about this to any of the people talking about Zionist, right? Guess
Yeah.
what they're going to do the next day? Are they going to say, "Oh my goodness, there's this other conflict where people are dying and intentionally being killed with no warning and massacred and thrown into fires?" In the
Yeah.
case of Rohingya, but I'm saying here, right?
Yeah.
No, they're going to go back. They're like, "Oh, that's bad." All right,
Yeah.
Zionist. Like, I think that the individual people have an incentive because they're so upset. I want to
I want to
analyze
run
why.
some.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to run something by you.
yeah.
Now, obviously, both of us are looking primarily at English language media, English language coverage, whether it's on social media or corporate media. Um, and I feel like, at least for some people, maybe not for everyone, but for some people, um, they because the English language coverage is going to be mostly in Western countries, the English speaking world, right? Europe, and the United States, etc. Those are people who their countries, their own countries, are either funding or backing or providing support or diplomatic cover for a conflict. Like the conflict in Sudan doesn't directly involve U.S. backing. The U.S. government hasn't come out. Anthony Blinken hasn't gone to Sudan and talked to one side or the other. Congress hasn't sent X amount of money to either side. So and the media is paying less attention to it. Just the whether for whatever reason the media has, they're not pushing that. Again, I think partially it comes down to viewership. They just feel like if they were airing information about the war in Sudan, not a lot of people would tune in.
Yeah.
But
But I want to dig into why is that. So let's spend a few
yeah,
minutes trying to understand. Yes, I critique the for-profit model of the news, right? And
yeah,
definitely that informs their selection, right? So like
yeah,
Fox News, as an example, is not ever going to report that a study came out where single payer cost less than something else because that would
exactly. Yeah,
alienate,
yeah,
right, their viewers. This is not going to alienate their viewers that there's a conflict in Sudan or the Congo. It's just
no,
that people don't care as much, and therefore the media in turn does not show it because they. So I want to dig into why is it that people care more about a tiny country, right, than say Pakistan, uh,
hmm,
which is the fifth largest population in the world, right?
yeah,
And so when again, this is not comparable to the Gaza massacre right now of
mhm,
civilians. Um, Even though, like I said, I want to understand why they're not moving south, many of the parents with their children. Um,
mhm.
but Pakistan right now, 1.5 million. Guess what? 1.5 million Afghan
Oh
refugees.
yes, 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 yeah, yeah,
Talk about that for a second. Okay, it's happening right now. Ethnic cleansing, we could say. Well, I don't think it's ethnic cleansing because it is their legal right to expel them. But this is
mhm,
very similar to Operation Wetback, which is United States Operation Wetback, where they
mhm.
literally deported like the last time they deported million Muslims. Sorry, Muslims, a million Mexicans.
Mexicans, yeah,
Yeah, Mexicans. Over a million. Some of them American citizens because they made mistakes. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
Okay, they literally went ahead. I don't know, are these cages? I don't know, but they went ahead and deported them.
yeah,
That is what Pakistan is doing right now. Okay, and that is what Kuwait did with Palestinians. Now, it's not as
yeah,
ethnic cleansing. It's not as again. I don't even think it's ethnic cleansing because these people have no legal status, perhaps
mhm.
in the country, but it's somewhere between ethnic cleansing and like just a huge population transfer. I don't
Forced
know.
deportation or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah. And so, like, again, bigger country than Israel, way more nukes than Israel, way more land territory than Israel, way more everything than Israel. Like,
mhm,
except Israel's in the news all the time.
yeah,
If Israel did forget, okay, the Gaza bombing is a bombing, but you know when Israel like moved some houses of some Palestinians after like a court battle, and then they won the court.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, like that is akin to like the United States moving black people out of like a highway, like an area of a highway. What is that called? When the government takes eminent domain, eminent
yeah,
domain.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Or
How is like a run-of-the-mill use of eminent domain in Israel? I'm not saying okay, it's obviously systemic, etc., right? But
mhm, mhm.
how is it that a run-of-the-mill use of eminent domain in Israel gets more coverage around the world than this
I think
1.5 million.
I think that if Israel were in the Chinese sphere of influence, if Israel was a super strong Chinese ally, had nothing to do with the United States, was not strongly involved with the Western world, I don't think we'd be seeing anywhere near the amount of coverage or the amount of attention being paid to it right now, as we do currently. I think that a lot of it. I mean, yeah, to me at least that's kind of that's a big part of it that there's the people care because it connects to them in some way, whether they feel that their tax dollars are being spent on it or they feel that their government is involved in something that they disagree with or they agree with. Some people both sides, right? There are people who pay attention because it matters to them and they care about the situation for the other side. There's attention, there's a lot of attention being paid. Like I don't think that the mainstream media, most of them are reporting on what's happening there because they are promoting it for the pro-Palestine crowd. I don't. I think that they do it because there are a lot of people in the United States who care about the welfare of Israel. I think that there's a significant part of the population that
Yeah.
does.
Now, look,
Um,
I don't want to say the other way. I don't want to say it's all because of the Jews and people care about it because the Jews are doing it. There is a lot of because the United States is supporting them, right?
Yeah,
But,
I mean,
but look,
there's so much involvement from the West. Again, if this was, and again, I think that's why. I'd have to look at foreign language news, other to see kind of if the reporting is different, right? Like for example, if I was a Chinese person living in China and I opened my newspaper, would I find more information about things happening in that sphere of influence than about what's happening in Israel
well,
right
here's
now?
my theory. Here's my theory.
Like
My theory is that in the West we have billions of people who believe in Abrahamic religion, Christianity
yeah,
or Islam, okay?
hmm
And 16 million people who are Jewish,
hmm
many of whom are atheist or secular, but many of
hmm
whom do believe in Judaism, okay?
yeah,
And I don't think this will be news to anyone watching this if we put this out, but
yeah,
the Christianity came out of a Jewish sect, right?
hmm
Based on Jewish religion,
hmm
building on top of it. And Islam was started by Muhammad, who also was familiar with Jews and who arguably got a lot of ideas from Jews. But regardless, Islam looks a lot like Jewish and talks a lot about Jewish prophets and Jewish,
yeah.
right? They're not talking about Chinese prophets, right?
No,
Although,
I understand. Yeah, yeah. Obviously a very strong connection between the Abrahamic faiths.
and so, in my opinion, it has manifested itself into some sort of Jews live rent free in their head. Um, I'm not going to say that's anti-Semitic because sometimes it's philo-Semitic. Sometimes the evangelical Christians in the U.S. are very
Yeah,
philo-Semitic, right?
yeah,
The reason that APAC is so influential is because
yes,
of the evangelicals
yeah. The
in
Christian
that right,
Zionists. Yeah,
right? Christian right is a bigger deal than APAC.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're a larger voting base. They're a large number of the voters that generally vote for Republicans are evangelical Christians. Like and they have to push ideas or policies or positions that will secure those votes. Right?
And go ahead,
There's a
please.
lot of domestic politics involved in the situation, not just international relations, right? Like there's, and it's not just, yeah, it's like you say, it's not just specific to American Jews, for example. Because the evangelical Christian or Christian Zionist population is much larger.
Yeah, I would say, look, Americans obviously have a lot of Jews who have fled to the United States, including
Yeah,
from Russia and
yeah,
former Soviet countries as well. Um, and so they're aware of the Holocaust, right? They're
yeah,
aware of like all these things. Now, the Christian right in America is very
mhm,
pro-Israel.
yep,
And some might say it's because they want the Messiah to come, right? Where's he going to come if there's no Israel, right? If there's, you know, if Jesus is a Palestinian, I guess he's waiting for the state of Palestine to show up. But at the end of the day, like that's what they're and look, not all Christians were always in favor of Jews. I'm sure it
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
surprise people. The Catholics at the time in the 19th century were doing pogroms, and
yeah,
Russian
yeah,
Orthodox were doing pogroms. So obviously, it's a new phenomenon of Christians actually being in favor of Jews.
yeah,
So I like that part, obviously as a Jew, but I would like that in any case, if any group of people was supported by another group of people
yeah,
to not be, attacked. But having said that, I think it's great that Palestinians are supported by so many people to not be attacked. I think that's
yeah,
great. Um,
yeah, yeah,
what I don't think is great is they're not supporting anyone else in the entire world, like Sudan, Congo, Muslims. The Muslims aren't supporting Chechens. They're not supporting
yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah,
and the last thing I want to say about that is, how the Yemeni, this goes to show very well the Houthis, okay,
yeah,
support Palestinians, right? They support Hamas. Okay. So Ansar Allah, which is the official name, right, of the Houthi,
yeah, yeah,
okay, they are now look, some people think that they don't care. This is Haaretz, this is a leftist
yeah,
Israel.
yeah.
They say,
Really
look, the
retarded.
Houthis don't care about Palestinians. They're attacking Israel to gain support. Remember how I showed you that the proxy war
Yeah.
between the Saudis is for it's for dick measuring inside the Gulf. It's not even about
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So supporting Palestinians in the Muslim world right now is like supporting Ukrainians in the Western world. Okay. It is.
Yes. Yes. I understand the sort of the parallel you're making. Yeah.
Yeah, because Russia is too different, so they can be the other. They can be the
Yeah.
boogeyman.
Us versus them. You know, it's yeah.
Exactly, us versus them. And I ask a simple question, and I want to ask you this question, right? Houthis, and not just Houthis, but most of Yemen, right, supports Palestinians, right?
Mhm.
It looks like it. I mean, people come out, okay?
Yeah.
Here's my question. Yemen remains the largest humanitarian crisis in the world.
Yeah.
This year,
Yeah.
okay, and every other year. Like, it's not 21 million people, okay. 80% of the
Yeah.
country goes to
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's
Yeah,
my
for you. Well, it's such a conflict that is dragged on for so long and has and affected so many civilians, particularly in terms of famine. People just starving to death, right?
and in some ways that's worse than the bombings because the bombings are the and I said this when I debated with Vosh. Vosh is a left,
uh,
Vosh.
I don't. I like I sorry. I don't like Vosh. I'm aware of Vosh. I don't know.
I can't dig it up right now, but when I talked to Vosh, I had a couple discussions with him. He's a character, he
Yeah.
likes to say things like, I'm right and everyone else is wrong, and I don't care what people say, and I don't care. But I just want to say this about Vosh. The second time when I told him this, he hung up because he was triggered, I guess, and he said, "Oh, this guy's never coming on my show." What I had said was he accused me of back then it was Ukraine, okay? It was
Yeah.
Russia. And I said, listen, um, you don't care about I was responding because he said, you're like a moral monster. You don't care about, I said, you are not looking at all of the deaths which are in the background, the non-sensational deaths of
Yeah.
like, oh, I remember now. He was talking about Bucha, okay? And I was saying, yes, 12 people were killed in Bucha, provably right on this way. But then the Guardian found out that the people killed in Bucha, the vast majority were actually killed with this thing. They exhumed the bodies, okay, and they
Hmm.
looked at dozens of bodies, okay, and then if you extrapolate, it turns out, surprise, surprise, most people were killed in a crossfire where people were shooting RPGs at tanks from apartment buildings, and the tanks were shooting these horrific cluster munition, not cluster munitions, but things that basically metal arrows that
Yeah. Machetes. Yeah.
Flechettes just go out and shoot
Yeah.
people. And my point to him was, look, I get that war crimes are committed, and there were certainly war crimes committed by Russians in Bucha, and I get that.
Mhm.
But the vast majority of people that die in this war die of very boring things that the media doesn't report on. And
Yeah.
I told him, you have a bias. You care about sensational deaths, and you need to understand that the vast majority of deaths, like this, what you're saying, struggling to put food on the table and
Yeah.
dying of that, is not going to get reported.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was just like hung up. He got triggered from that. But, but I just remember that. But my point is this: is that, dude, like, you're right. Like, the vast majority of people are not going to die from the bombs. Even they're going to
Yeah.
die if
Oh,
this goes
they're
on.
gonna die of disease, and they're gonna die of lack of health care and lack of access to food, clean water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's the immediate deaths. Yeah, I mean, in a sort of a grim way, you could say that those are the ones that got out easy or easier, relatively speaking, because then there's the extended humanitarian crisis after the fact. And
Yeah, my question is, and I want to ask you this question, is like the Houthis and a lot of Yemenites support Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, which is what Hamas
yeah,
means. Um, they support Palestinian cause. What do they support? The Palestinian cause, right? But they also support
Mhm.
they stand for end the crisis in Gaza. Great, Great.
Yeah.
So my question is, how many Palestinians have come out and supported the crisis in Yemen against,
Mhm.
say, Saudi bombings or
Yeah.
anything, you know?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah. I mean, I assume you're talking about over the last several years, right? Like,
anytime anytime ever, like,
yeah.
would you ever see a crowd of Palestinians or Palestine supporters come out to say, hey, you know what? The US has been US planes and bombs have been used by
Mhm.
Saudis. Like
Yeah.
everything you're saying, Saudis are supported by the US. Uh, there's an open air prison. There was an open air prison. Yemen was blockaded. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
80% of people are facing hunger. I
Mhm.
think it's a little overblown. I don't think millions are like 21 million are facing hunger, but like at least a million are like
Yeah.
close to starvation. Okay.
Yeah.
And so look at this article. I just want to show you. The indiscriminate bombings have become a hallmark of the Yemen war, drawing international scrutiny of the countries. Let's be clear. The international scrutiny is by like the bureaucrats. Okay.
The governments, yeah, or like, yeah, international organizations, not the people.
Yeah, so like it's very muted international scrutiny of the countries
Mhm.
participating in the air campaign. And that would, oh, I'm sorry, international scrutiny of the countries participating in the air campaign, which is among, it's the Gulf countries. It was
Yeah.
UAE added
Saudi, yeah.
Saudis, and those arming them, including the United States. Okay, support for the Saudi effort, which has been
Yeah.
criticized by human rights groups. To their credit, human rights groups, including Human Rights Watch, criticize Hamas. They criticize Israel. They criticize
Yeah.
Azov Battalion. They criticize Russia. Like they are at least out there putting out
Yeah.
their criticism, right? And that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is this: is that look at this region, right? This country here can't find Israel on this map. Okay, there's Israel,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah.
Yemen, a country of
Yeah.
40 million people.
Yeah.
And here's what I want to say about that. Um, this paragraph during the Russia bombing of Mariupol,
Mhm.
this paragraph really drove it home for me. I just want to read
Yeah.
it to you, and I want to get your reaction for this. While Russia's bombings of a maternity hospital, which by the way, 2 people died,
Yeah.
and as far as I know, and one of the people eventually went out and said that she actually supports what Russia did. She was bombed. She said that
Mhm.
because um she delivered her baby, right? She wasn't the one who died, but she said Azov Battalion was using the hospital, the
Yeah.
maternity.
Yeah.
Now, it's a maternity ward, and I agree, but it's the number of people matters. It's 2 people.
Yeah.
Um, not to absolve Russia, there was later a theater with 400 civilians that Russia may have bombed. Okay, art
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
and this art school, it said kids are inside. So like
Yeah.
Russia denies bombing it, and they claim that it was blown up from the inside by Azov Battalion. Okay,
Yeah.
um, I'm gonna say even though Russia denies it, they have never shown any evidence that they haven't bombed it, and
Mhm.
they started burying evidence. So
Yeah.
let's suppose Russia did it. Let's suppose that Russia bombed 400 people, right? Here's
Okay.
here's okay, now this is the paragraph. While Russia's bombings of a maternity hospital and other civilian targets in Ukraine have drawn widespread public indignation as war crimes, thousands of similar strikes have taken place against Yemeni civilians. The indiscriminate
Yeah.
bombings have become a hallmark of the Yemen war, drawing international scrutiny of the countries, etc. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thousands of
Yeah.
similar strikes. We're talking about hospitals. We're talking
Yeah.
about markets, mosques, maybe.
Mhm.
So it seems to fit all your criteria. The United
Yeah.
States supports, and yet, and there's more people. There's 40 million versus 2 million.
Yeah.
And there's open air prisons at some point. Um,
Yeah.
and hospitals are being bombed. So again, none of those things can explain then why is it that Israel, right? And my question is, when did the Palestinians support Yemenites? Like the other way, it's popular for Yemenites to take this position because they get some sort of like brownie points, or I guess, according to Haaretz, that they're getting, you know what I
It
mean?
draws attention to them and their issue, and it gives
Yeah.
them sort of a groundswell of support. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. Again, you have to take a step back and take a look at how the entire war in Yemen is being presented to the U.S. population, to the Western world. How many people are aware of it? How much news coverage we see about what's happening in Yemen? How many people are aware that the U.S. is even involved or is backing Saudi in Yemen? Right? And the information is there. You just said Human Rights Watch talked about it. Obviously the news is reporting, the information is out there, but it's not being promoted in the same way, and people aren't seeing it, aren't getting this sort of constant barrage of information. And I don't know why. I can't give an explanation. I can't give a definitive explanation. At least I can postulate. I can come up with theories, but yeah, there's obviously uneven coverage. There's and even though the scale of the crisis is much bigger. More people are affected. It has lasted a longer amount of time. But yeah, I haven't seen any State Department officials come out and talk about what's going on in Yemen. I haven't seen Congress sit down and really debate the funding that we send to Saudi to be used in Yemen, etc. Like, why is there not this much attention being paid, even though it is at the very least as important,
This is
right?
I coined the Magershak ratio. So my last name is Magershak, and this is the ratio that Human Rights Watch was founded on, I think.
Yeah.
Basically the ratio of how much outrage is there
Yeah,
versus how much actual suffering there is.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
yeah,
And I hope to make a website where people can film their local,
yeah.
situation. But like, dude, my takeaway is that the world's still fucked up. It's not as fucked up as it
No.
was like during World War II. And yeah,
We could easily have this conversation for another couple hours, just talking about sort of the presentation or the image that is being projected of the international rules based order and international law versus how it is actually applied or isn't applied in most cases, or attention isn't being paid. Right, it ends up being sort of a rules for you but not for me situation. We talk about how important it is for international law to be followed, but then the U.S. backs Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen, right? Like where we have the United States literally has laws about not doing that, the Leahy laws, and they're never applied when they should be, right? It's there's a huge disconnect between sort of what we pretend the world is like and what the world is really like, and it ends up just being to the detriment of all of these people in countries that most Americans can't find on a map, right? They end up bearing the brunt of this facade of order that we like to project. Meanwhile, whether it's the West or China or Russia or anyone or the Middle East, the Gulf countries, right? They're all pursuing their imperialist interests, and we just don't talk about it because it would sort of disrupt this idea that no, there are rules and we follow the rules and we're here to uphold order.
right.
Meanwhile, it never happens, right?
I mean, you're
And
right. Like I feel that every country thinks they're okay, they're fine. Like
yeah,
I just randomly, this guy, says even with the crimes US has committed, they didn't engage in genocide.
sure they didn't.
I'm like, okay, what do you call this? Like Laos.
Yeah, right. Like no. The U.S. says hands are clean.
So, so dude, like, and I would say the same to the Arab countries and the Gulf countries.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Oh, dude, it's abysmal. It's abysmal how the yeah, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, right? They talk about embracing modernity and how we are casting aside these outdated sort of ways of thinking and stuff, and we're ready to become part of the modern world. And so, meanwhile, they're engaged in genocide in Yemen, and right, like it's
and in Sudan, it's yeah. I mean, look, like I said, to be fair to the UAE and others, right? There's two sides to the conflict. There's Iran
Yeah.
arming the Yemen, the Houthis.
Yeah,
And, and the-
yeah, I guess it's, you could say there's like sort of like tiers, right? There's sort of like the actual conflict, and then there's the proxy war, and there's the sort of the geopolitical regional interests from different players, right? And where the money is coming from and where it's going. And,
no one's
uh,
clean. No one is, is a good guy in all of these things. And so
no,
that is to me the narrative, and the proxy war to me is the biggest explainer of
definitely.
this. So if you have another, do you have 10 minutes? Do you have 5 to 10 minutes?
I have 10 minutes. I would like to, I'm down to do a part two at some point for sure. But yeah, let's yeah, go
Do
ahead.
you feel it's fair? Do you feel I'm being fair and fact based?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard to deny that there's more to the situation than most people are aware of. There's more to not just the situation in Israel, but all over the world. And in fact, the situation in Israel is sort of um, one that more people than are aware of than most of these issues, right? But yeah, it's certainly not unique what's happening there. I think there are certain aspects of it that maybe differentiate it, but every conflict is going to have its own character. Every conflict is going to have its own, oh, but in this one this happened, and in this one it was this situation, right? You can't apply a blanket sort of rule to all regional
Yeah,
or
exactly.
military conflicts. But yeah, definitely in the Western world, definitely to sort of the global awareness, um, um, because of the status of the Western world on the global stage, this is being paid more attention to, for sure. Like it's there's no other way of saying it.
Okay, so the last 10 minutes, let me zoom back into Gaza and Israel. Okay,
Yeah,
because in some way I almost wish that you were a more radical, right? That you were, because my whole thing is, right, I wanted to talk to
yeah.
someone who's like super anti-Israel, like Zionists are behind
I, I,
everything.
I I think it's well because the more you know, the harder it is to take an extreme position. Like the more you know about what's happening in the world generally, the harder it is to be like, this is pure evil and this is pure good, because it's never that way, right?
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
the most people who are radical, who are radicalized, it's because they are only presented with a specific subset of information.
So let me ask you. So I gave you my background, right? Russian,
Yeah.
Jewish from Russia. What is your connection to Israel, Gaza, Israel, Palestine? Like, what is your background?
I'm Muslim. I'm Egyptian. I wasn't born in Egypt. I lived there for a while, but I grew up in the United States. Um, my I don't have I don't have like a personal connection to the issue, but obviously there's sort of the cultural sort of when you grow up, in a Muslim or in an Arab household, the issue definitely comes up, right? Like
Right, sure,
it
of course.
and whenever there's a flare up in sort of the conflict, a lot of attention is paid to it. And so, but for me, I took it upon myself to kind of try to educate myself as much as possible. Try to read, try to talk to people, try to get different views, try to understand the different arguments. And I am passionate about the subject, but I again, I grew up here. I have Jewish friends, and so I can't look at Jews and be like, oh, they're monsters, right? Because I know many of them personally, right? I can't just otherize them because I know them, right?
Right.
And I've they've always been. I feel very welcome when I'm with my Jewish friends and with their families, and I think they I've never felt that they looked at me any differently, and so I just don't think that there is this this demonization doesn't have to exist. It doesn't have to happen from either side.
It doesn't
and
have to
and
happen on either side. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I just feel like if we can break out of this cycle, if we can just really, really like get a solution in place, get at least on the right path to getting, you know, these people to coexist. It would be better for everyone. It would be better for like think about how much anti-Semitism has increased in the last few months, in the last couple of months, over what's happening unfairly, right? Like it's I like there's you you we shouldn't be painting all Jews with, you know, with the same brush as specifically the government of Israel or something,
I should
right?
also say exactly, and I should also say that it's not unique. Like Russians in 2022
yeah,
and kicked out of restaurants or whatever for speaking Russian,
right. Like
because the government, yeah, was attacking.
yeah. I think that this only ends up harming everyone, even inside and outside, anyone connected to this issue, anyone who feels connected to this issue or who takes a side is only going to end up being hurt, or is only going to end up being affected negatively. Pro-Palestinian supporters who are outspoken pro-Palestinian supporters find themselves losing jobs or being blacklisted.
That's
Jewish
terrible.
people, simply for being Jewish, they get the, murderers, right? Like it's not. And even if, and there are so many Jewish people who don't support what's happening, right, or who have objections, at least, right, like who say, you know, I support Israel, but I do not think that the Israeli government should be pursuing this course of action, right?
Exactly.
And yet they are otherized as well. They are immediately considered the enemy, and that way of thinking is never going to allow us to move past this sort of frame of reference that it is a conflict and it has to be a conflict always.
I've seen rabbis who are like anti-Zionist and say, even though I'm anti-Zionist, I feel that the jihadists in Gaza are worse, right? And they're
Mhm.
like, no, you're Zionist, and like you're
Yeah,
evil.
there's this inherent like need to look at someone and be, it's again, it's that if you're not with us, you're against us mentality, right? Like we've had this kind of uh, uh um you're either with us or you're against us. It's us versus them. It's there's no room for shades of gray. There's no
Right.
room for like no, this is, we can find some common ground and we
There's
can
no room because I feel
reject.
like people are radicalized by their media to see only one side of the narrative, right? Nobody wants
Yeah,
these
yeah,
Twitter.
yeah.
They're not going to
I
post
was
both sides on the Twitter.
I was dismayed. That's the only word that I can say that really is appropriate. I was dismayed when I saw the poll that was conducted of the Israeli population, where something like 90 odd percent was in either in favor, like supported what's happening in Gaza, or thought that it wasn't enough. And I thought, there's no way that you can look at what's happening there and be like, no, 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 we have to be doing more. We have to be pushing harder, unless you're being presented with that message in a certain way,
Yes.
right? I refuse to believe that Israelis as a whole are just bloodthirsty, or right, or that they could be looking at it the way I'm looking at it and then coming to a completely different conclusion. There has to be a different presentation going on. You know what I mean? Like it can't be that they are being presented with the same set of information that I have and then coming to this radically different conclusion.
They're
And I'm not
extremists.
saying that there
Yeah.
isn't, I'm not saying that there isn't any, I'm
There's
not
some
saying that there isn't
extremists.
a
There's
cause
some
for what's
extremists.
happening there.
You're right.
I'm
There are
not
some
saying there is, yeah, like I'm not saying that there isn't a reason for what is happening.
like there are
Um,
some extremists who are in Israel, and there's some extremist. There are many extremists in Gaza. You could tell my bias a little bit.
Definitely.
But I will say this, that the extremists in Israel, they are extremists. Um, and who knows where they will escalate and where the next generation will be if they're allowed to win, right? If they're allowed
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
like back there. Um,
Even people talk about how dangerous Netanyahu is, and how he, if we could just get rid of Netanyahu, things would be better. Netanyahu isn't even the most far right person in the current administration. Like there
exactly.
are people who are more
Wasn't,
extreme than Netanyahu himself.
and Putin was
Like
not the most
exactly, Ben
extreme.
Gvir, Smotrich, right? Like
Yeah,
we there are people who want way more than what is happening, and way more than what even the current administration is pushing for. Um, and if that position is fostered and is allowed to become the norm, then this is only going to get worse. the situation is only going to get worse.
So the last 5 minutes, let me
And,
focus on.
like I said, it's the same. It's the same on the other side, right? Like again, I said in 2006, you had 80% of the voters polled in favor of peace with Israel. If you ran that poll today, it would be much less, right? And that's because the two sides are not coming closer together; they're growing further apart, and that has to be stopped. We have to find a way of preventing this from this radicalization on both sides from continuing. Otherwise, it's only going to end in total destruction.
Exactly. I think so. The sum up, and then I just want to spend 5 minutes on the solutions, and we could have a part two. But like the
Yeah.
sum up for now, it looks like, look, this is one conflict out of many,
Yeah.
okay, throughout the world. We should educate ourselves at other conflicts because all lives matter, not just Israelis and Gazans, but everyone matters.
Yeah.
And my personal opinion is because the Abrahamic faiths have Judaism as their root, they look at Jews as more of a news story, and them settling in Palestine is more of a newsworthy thing than Sri Lanka Tamil Tigers or some
Yeah,
other.
but there's a lot of shared history, right? There's a connection there, whether just a faith-based connection, right? There's
Exactly. So what I want to talk about in the last 5 minutes, and we could do a part two that dives into solutions. In
Yep.
my opinion, a lot of the rejection of Israel is different than it comes from the offended Islamic supremacy idea. What do I mean by that? Um, it was throughout hundreds of years that Muslims consider themselves the victors, the powerful, and a lot of the religion is about that. It's not like with Christianity where people are powerless, right, and so on. And so the concept of someone who is a dhimmi is a protected person. It could be
Mhm.
Christian, Jewish, whatever, right? Um, the nice part is when you get protected, right? But the fundamentalist Islamic part is when you don't just get protected, but you have to know your place, which is submission.
Yeah.
You have to wear different shoes. You can't be higher than a Muslim. And this was in many of the laws. And so when the Jews were finally created this country where they took a bunch of Muslims or Arabs, right, and they expelled them, it was worse than if Assad did it or if King Faisal
I,
did it.
I get what you're saying, but um, the dhimmi status, like again, we have to look at these things sort of in the time frame in which they existed. Like even the Ottoman Empire abolished dhimmitude in like the 17 or 1800s. Like it's not something anybody who was still pushing for those ideas to be applied today is living in the past,
Well,
and I
one
wouldn't
moment.
support that.
This is just to be clear, even though they abolished it, it took a different form. Just to give you three examples, the
Yeah.
Armenian genocide is because the Christians were very different. It was worse to be a Christian than Jewish in the Ottoman Empire. And just
Uh-huh.
for anyone who watches this, like the Ottoman Empire is the empire in which Palestine existed. Okay. So
Yeah.
if you were Christian in the Ottoman
Most
Empire,
recently.
right, you could have lived in the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem, right, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you had a lot of ethnic conflict with the Muslim population. And if you were Assyrian, okay, Assyrians are also an ancient people.
Yeah.
And they were also in the Ottoman Empire, and they were
Hmm.
massacred hundreds of thousands by the Ottomans. And if you were
Hmm.
Greek, a Christian, and again, not to downplay, Greeks obviously had territorial ambitions and so on, okay? But when you had the Greek genocide around that
Hmm.
same time, it also happened in the 19th century. So if you look at the Ottoman Empire that you brought up, right, the Ottoman
Hmm.
Empire may have removed the status of dhimmitude or whatever, right? And some Muslims may have looked at Turks and said, "You're not even like real Muslims," and they had words for them that
Yeah. Yeah.
something else.
The-
But
yeah.
but but the idea of ethnic conflict was so bad that
Yeah.
literally hundreds of thousands of Christians were massacred in the Ottoman Empire.
No, I agree. But I think that it is important to separate the religious element of it. This is like a something connected to Islam specifically, versus the sort of ethno-imperialist element of the Ottoman Empire. Because keep in mind, the Ottoman Empire exerted control over a lot of the Ottomans themselves exert control over a lot of Arab states, and eventually those Arab states wanted to be separated from the Ottoman Empire, which came to pass, at the end of the First World War with the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. But I again, and I'd have to do more research before I can sit down
Yeah, let's do
and
more
talk with
research for
confidence.
next time. But I want to play.
Okay.
I want to play you like 2 minutes of this video, and just I
Yeah,
want to
sure.
get your reaction. Okay, this is the video. This is an Islamic preacher. I don't know where he is, to be honest. Okay, I don't
Okay.
know, but I think he represents the type of intolerant, not intolerant Islam, but a fundamentalist Islam. Okay.
Okay.
Unlike Jewish fundamentalism, no, actually, no. Both Christian and Islamic and Jewish fundamentalism requires political power, the state
Yeah.
enforce. Okay. So this is what he would do, and this is what he says. The Hadith says that you should do with the non-Muslims. Take a listen.
Is there equality of faith? If we look to one hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the authority of Abu Huraira, Sahih Muslim. So no Sunni Muslim can really argue against Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari. Rasulullah said, don't greet the Jews and the Christians before they greet you. And when you meet any of them on the roads, force them to go on the narrow side of it. And Imam Malik, he said the same thing as well. In fact, Umar ibn Khattab, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that if there was to be another Nabi after me, it would be Umar ibn Khattab in his own charter, not charter of United Nations, in his charter with the people of Sham, with those Christians of Sham, in his charter was Kafir and Muslim, they're not allowed to wear the same clothes as one another. If the Muslim, he comes out on the day of Eid and he sees Kafir with nice clothes, the Kafir has to take his clothes off and give it to the Muslims. The Kafir, when he walks inside the street, he has to wear a red belt around his neck and he has to have his forehead shaved and he has to wear two shoes which are different from one another. He's not allowed to, and he's not allowed to walk on the pavement. He has to walk in the middle of the road and he has to ride on a mule. And that's only for the adults, not for the children. And you can see how Islam would make the child become a Muslim. The kafir or the child growing up in a state of kufr, he will turn to Islam. Why? Because the child will be walking along with his dad. He said, Dad, yeah, why you got your forehead shaved? I don't know whether these Muslims, they make me do it. Why you got to walk? Why can't you ride the animal? Like the Muslims, they ride the animal like this. Why are you walking with both legs dangling on the side of the donkey? Why is it every time the Muslim comes to you, he asks you for your clothes, you give it? Why is it every time he tells you to get down from the horse, you have to take it? And not only that, he said the kuffar, they can have their churches. They can have their churches, but they're not allowed to ring the bell. And if a Muslim, he's walking by, let's say, for example, a Muslim's been on Edgware Road, for example. He's had some nice shisha, some nice steak.
Can you play the first part again? Can you rewind it from the beginning? There was something that I wanted to hear again.
Sure, from the beginning.
Yes, please. Yeah, it's not the whole. Yeah, just the first maybe minute of it or something.
Faith. If we look to one hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the authority of Abu Huraira, Sahih Muslim. So no Sunni Muslim can really argue against Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari. Rasulullah said, don't greet the Jews and the Christians before they greet you. And when you meet any of them on the roads, force them to go on the narrow side of it. And Imam Malik, he said the same thing as well. In fact, Umar ibn Khattab, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
He's just listing the authorities that he says are.
Yeah. No, this is the part that I wanted to hear. This part here.
Okay.
he said that if there was to be another Nabi after me, it would be Umar ibn Khattab in his own charter, not charter of United Nations, in his charter with the people of Sham, with those Christians of Sham, in his charter was Kafir and Muslim, they're not allowed to wear the same clothes as one another.
Okay,
If the
that's
Muslim, he comes out
the
on
part
the
that I
day,
wanted to hear. So I don't know who this guy is. He's not Arab. I can tell from his accent that he's not an Arabic speaker. He sounds maybe Pakistani. And I would obviously have to go and take a look at the hadiths that he mentions, and the charter that he speaks of. I'm not sure if he's talking about the Convent of Omar or which charter he's talking about. But there are obviously, I reject everything that he says. But specifically because he makes an equivalence between the kuffar, the kind of infidels, quote unquote, and Christians and Jews, who are two completely different categories of people. And anyone who is a Muslim scholar would know that the kuffar are were in the time of the Prophet, the idolaters, the Christians and Jews were considered people of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And they were given a different status than idol worshippers or polytheists. etc. So I do have to what does this say here? The person is believes in.
It also includes rejecting the tenets of Islam, though, which sounds like
Uh, yeah, see, so if you go down here, the people, you can click on people of the book. The Quran distinguishes between the mushrikun, who are the polytheists, or the people who associate a god other than God,
you're right. It does
uh,
sometimes disagreed on applying the term to people of the book. So, in other
yeah.
words,
I would say that he's taking a very extreme position because in all the cases that I've seen, all the practical cases that I've seen, the Christians and Jews are not considered kuffar. They're considered Ahl Kitab, which is people of the book, and they are treated. They're for example, Christians and Jews, when living in a territory that was conquered or taken control of by Muslims, they were able to continue practicing their religion, and they were the dhimmi status was afforded to them. The kuffar were not. They had to either leave or convert, as far as I'm aware. Um, and so there is definitely a distinction in the Quran itself between kuffar and people of the book.
well,
So I would have to go back and
I
see
would
who this
say
guy
that
is and
yeah.
what he's trying to say. But this what he's proposing is a very extreme position, to the extent where I would say it could even be considered un-Islamic by mainstream. What would be considered un-Islamic by mainstream Muslims?
This is the issue that I have, right? Is what he's describing, it would be considered Islamic supremacy. I think that's
Yeah.
fair to say. Just
Oh,
like
what he's describing, I yes, would be considered that for sure.
okay, so Islamic supremacy, and I think people dhimmi are
Hmm.
protected. They're protected people. They have to pay the jizya tax,
Hmm.
right? But they are supposed to be protected. However,
Yeah.
here's what I'm trying to say. Because there's a controversy and a disagreement. There's some
Yeah.
people believe like he does.
Yeah.
I call them Islamists, people
Hmm.
who may believe that Muslim supremacy, that in fact they should take over the government and enforce the Islamic law on everyone, right?
Yeah.
Um, in that case, the reason I have an issue with that is because throughout
Yeah.
history, they'll go and part two will go through this, okay? But
Mhm.
throughout history, people were able to latch on to certain things,
Yeah.
okay? Um, latch onto these, like let me take just Yemen, for example,
Yeah.
okay? Um, in the 17th century, Yemenite Jews were considered impure and therefore forbidden to touch a Muslim or Muslim's food. They were obliged to humble themselves before a Muslim, walk on the left side, greet him first, exactly like he's talking about in the Hadith.
Yeah, this is somebody. This is somebody is weaponizing Islam for political gain in this example, because there's nothing in the Quran. There's nothing in Islam that says that you can't touch a Jew, or it's like they have
Oh, it's in
to.
the Hadith. It's not in the
Yeah.
it's not in the
Yeah,
Quran.
I mean, even that I would say is debatable, but I will do some research before we talk
Next
next,
time,
so
do
that I
some
have
research.
some
Here's what I
sources.
want to
Yeah,
say is that some people, as you've seen in Christian
yeah,
countries, they use a certain interpretation, okay?
of course, yeah, yeah,
For example, abortion. There's nothing in original Christian sources that I've ever found, or scholars that I know have found, that is against abortion in early Christian sources.
yeah,
Okay. It happens later on in the last 1,000 years that some Christian sects read into the text that you're committing murder of an unborn baby. Okay.
yeah.
And today, the evangelical right is very like they think it's like part of the Christian faith, right?
That
That
is a core tenet. Yeah,
for a tenant. So this is what I'm talking about. In some Islamic societies, like in Yemen
hmm
and maybe others, Morocco before the 20th century, uh, it was weaponized by the people in power. So they might read a certain, and Christians did this too, right? Blood libels on Jews.
I don't think a religion has ever existed that wasn't taken advantage of by someone for political power.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So like,
Sure.
I'll send you this list later. You could look at it. But this list really changed my mind. You know how people say, anti-Zionist people say that like, oh, it's the Zionists' fault. Before Zionism, Jews always lived side by side with Muslims, totally fine. And it does look, it would be very nice if that was the case, right? It would be, look at these evil Christians. They are the intolerant ones. And Muslims, ever since Umar, are very tolerant, right? And I will admit that Umar was very tolerant. And Salah ad-Din, Ibn Ayyub, okay, who was fought the Crusaders. He was very tolerant, and Maimonides was his personal doctor, I believe.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, other times and other countries, okay, Islamic history doesn't just exist for 100
Absolutely.
years. So expulsion from cities in Yemen, from
Yeah.
Sana'a, the capital, forced conversions, massacres, okay. And again, this is way before Zionists have ever existed. Okay.
No, I've seen this list, and I will have some notes ready. I don't have them handy right now, but yeah, definitely. But keep in mind, you're talking about a stretch of time that is about 1400 years across an enormous sort of geographic area.
Yes.
There is bound to have been many incidents where there was oppression, where there was intolerance, where there was abuse of religion or weaponization of religion to either for political or material or what have you gain. That's just there's it would be a fantasy to imagine that anywhere would exist for that amount of time over that much area without issues like this taking place. And so I completely agree with your statement that it wasn't always flowers and
look,
singing
yeah,
kumbaya.
and Jews, if they were in power, like Einstein said,
Yeah,
see,
anytime there's a somebody holding power over somebody else, there's going to we saw even the Stanford prison experiment, right? Like it
yes.
happened, right? It happens, and it's unfortunate, and it shouldn't happen, but it always will happen,
So
and that's just human
next
nature.
time I want to talk about uh, how offended Islamists, okay, meaning people believe that, well, in a word, that Palestine should be a caliphate. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, that's basically what they want. And I think a lot of the Islamic resistance movement, don't get me wrong, the children that are born in Gaza, they're blank slates. Okay, they're just regular humans. But this is what I want to do at the end. And again, maybe this is not fair, and I want to leave you with like the last, but I just want to play these two videos and show you my point. Okay. And again, I fully agree that what I'm showing now is a little bit like people showing Zionists, right? Extreme Zionists saying we should expel the Arabs or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, I don't think they want to kill all the Arabs. Here, I'm just going to play this, and then you tell me what you think. So when you're a child, you're a blank slate. Okay, you may as well be growing up in New Jersey. You're not going to hear this, and you're going to be different. But if you hear this, this is what you're going to hear. And this is Hamas programming in Gaza, which is, again, why I'm so opposed. Most of my opposition to Hamas isn't even what they're doing to Israel, because what are they doing? They're shooting rockets that are being shot down. Okay, good for Israel that they have the Iron Dome. Okay, my problem is they are radicalizing their own people while their leaders live in luxury, and their families are millionaires, living it up. This is so. Yeah,
I would ask that we save this video for the next segment that we do, just because there are plenty of videos from both sides that'll show
that'll do this
similar.
kind of thing. Yeah. All right,
Yeah,
fine. So I'll send you these videos. Look at them before.
Yeah, definitely
so
send me the links, and
send you the links.
unfortunately I didn't get the opportunity to do a lot of prep for our discussion today. I've discussed with you before kind of what's going on in my personal life
Do you
right
have
now.
any friends who are like a lot more militantly like anti-Zionist? Because again, I want to be able to hear them, just like I'm telling you
Yeah.
to hear. I'm just trying to bring on people who will legitimately tell me like Zionists are evil for this reason, and you know, they killed.
I think we kind of covered a broad range of topics this time. We didn't really get into the nitty-gritty of specifically what's going on in Israel and Gaza
Yeah,
now, or even historically. Um, I think that next time we should sort of focus on that, because we can actually address kind of the topics that you're talking about here. Kind of what are the arguments against Zionism? Because even if I'm not personally passionately invested, passionately anti-Zionist, but I am aware of the arguments, and I will. We can get into kind of the details of that
yeah. Let's get
in our
into the
next
details of that
conversation.
another time. Look, just I want to say, as a disclaimer, okay, this guy, even though he called for uh, all the Ummah or whatever to attack every Jew on the face of the earth, he was some other guys in Hamas said, shut up, like we just want Israel, like
Yeah,
we're in this area, we're fighting against Israeli occupation, not against all Jews. So to
yeah,
the credit of Hamas, there's a lot of people that want to keep it political in the area and not against all
a
Jews.
religious crusade. Yeah,
Okay. So, but my whole point is that even though maybe 90% of Muslims don't agree with that guy I showed you, right? This
yeah,
guy. And,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and just like, so I agree that maybe 70% of Hamas does not agree with this guy. Okay. But
Yeah.
30% does. Like there's a sizable percent. That's my
Yeah,
worry, is that they were growing up on this, right? And I'll send you this Hamas Mickey Mouse,
yeah,
Jew, not the Israeli, okay, killed a Jew, and then some of them retain that,
yeah,
and that's what I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
stop.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. And extremism is bad no matter where it is.
that's all.
It's yeah,
And on the Israeli side too. If you show me a
yeah,
video of them saying kill all the Arabs, right?
yeah,
Which I hope I haven't seen anything like that, but I have seen expel the Arabs, right?
yeah,
Kahana.
yeah,
Like I haven't seen kill, but that's still like bad. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and so I will admit, like that should be gone too, right? But
yeah,
so
absolutely,
we'll talk about solutions next time. But to me,
definitely.
the biggest problem in the region is honestly not the secular. Like how many? I'll ask one last question, okay? Just out of curiosity.
Okay. Yeah,
How
I
many?
gotta.
Then you got to go. How many Christian Gazans? Right, there are very
Yeah,
few Christian Gazans. I get it,
yeah.
very few. But how many Christians do you think have ever partaken in Al-Aqsa flood or the signed up with the Al-Qassam brigades of Hamas, if they even can be accepted into the Al-Qassam brigades, right? Or the Al-Quds brigades of Islamic Jihad. Okay,
Yeah,
the word Islamic is in there, but
I would be guessing. I would be pulling a number, out of my hat to, if I tried to answer that question.
my guess is
I
zero.
don't have.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say zero.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think any. I've never heard of a Christian martyr um, in Al-Aqsa flood or any of the other operations because um, they're not. I think they have a
Outlook.
different belief system. They don't believe that if they get martyred, they're going to go to heaven for
Okay.
killing. I might look. I think that plays a big role. I'm trying to say that I think the religious worldview that you have about
Yeah.
death.
I think that trying to frame this as a religious conflict is the wrong framing, and I think that should never be how it is looked at, either from the outside or by the participants, or the people involved in the conflict themselves. It should not be expanded to a religious war.
Exactly. I agree with you. And so we got to
Yeah.
stop this programming. But I think the only way to stop this programming is if Hamas uh, has no way to broadcast. I don't know. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway.
that's fair.
Okay. Anyways, man.
Yeah, I got to get going, but thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to to talk with you and have this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think we covered a lot of ground. And yeah, next time I think we can get in there with a more focused, sort of targeted conversation, and hopefully get some answers.
Yeah, man. Listen, I appreciate and thank you for coming on. And like I said, I wish you were much more radical because we agree on like so many things.
I'll see if I can find somebody who's more frothing at the mouth.
Just anyone who thinks the Zionists are like the worst thing since sliced bread and the
I don't know. Yeah.
all right, man. Thank you, and I'll send you this. And can I
Yeah,
post this,
absolutely.
put it online, and you can
Yeah, for sure. By all means.
all right, perfect. All right, man. Have a good
Take care. Have a good day. Yeah. See you around.